Hello everyone. Welcome to Frightening Tales. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So, before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. In 2023, a shocking case unfolded in Taiwan involving a young man who inherited a massive fortune worth 500 million new Taiwan dollars, approximately 15.9 million US, exposing a web of inheritance disputes and family scandals. The revelations included a father-in-law's illicit relationship with his daughter-in-law, an extramarital affair leading to a child, and even a same-sex marriage. To protect the victim's identity, Taiwanese media referred to the 18-year-old as Lai, and will use the same name here. When Lai was just 2, his grandfather, a tycoon with a billion TWD fortune, began transferring over 30 properties into his name. By the time Lai turned 18, legally an adult, his grandfather passed away, leaving him an estate valued at over 500 million new Taiwan dollars. If Li's life had followed this script, even if he couldn't become a notorious playboy like Wang Xian, he could have lived a life of luxury, a real estate mogul free from financial worries. But no one could have predicted that before the 500 million fortune could even settle in his hands, tragedy struck. At noon on May 4, 2023, police in Bonan District, Taichung City, received a report of a young man lying motionless on the street, suspected of having a stroke or fainting. When police and paramedics arrived, they found no signs of life. After a closer inspection, they noticed a distinct dent in the ground beneath the body, likely caused by a heavy object falling. This led them to suspect he had jumped from a building. With no identification found, police gathered information from nearby residents and witnesses at the scene. The body was taken to a funeral home for preservation, awaiting a forensic examination. During the registration process at the funeral home, the owner suddenly recognized the deceased's face. After a moment of recollection, he realized that just days earlier, this young man had been there to bid farewell to his grandfather, the wealthy Mr. Lai. At the time, Lai had carried the coffin as the eldest grandson. The funeral home owner immediately contacted Lai's mother, Ms. Chun, to confirm his identity. Upon seeing her son's cold body, Ms. Chun collapsed, overcome with grief, crying until she fainted. Within a week, her family had to organize 2 funerals, one for the elderly, one for the young. The successive tragedies nearly broke her spirit entirely. What she couldn't comprehend was that just that morning, her son had been healthy and cheerful, riding his newly bought motorcycle to meet friends. Yet hours later, he was gone forever. The greatest shock, however, was yet to come. Before Lai could even be laid to rest, someone arrived with a marriage certificate, claiming the right to inherit his entire estate as Li's spouse. Stunned, Miss Chin examined the certificate and confirmed it was legally valid with no signs of forgery. What she couldn't believe was the date of the marriage, 9 a.m. that very day, less than 3 hours before her son was found dead. The most staggering revelation of all was the identity of Li's spouse, a 24-year-old man named Sia. Not only had Lai suddenly entered a same-sex marriage in a whirlwind, but a mere 2 hours later, he was dead, leaving behind a $500 million new Taiwan dollar fortune. The story unfolded like a series of explosions, each more shocking than the last. So, who was Lai's partner? The key figure in this case? It turned out SIA had ties to the Lai family. His father was a real estate lawyer who over a decade earlier had handled the transfer of the 30-plus properties Lai's grandfather placed in his name. During that time, Lai and SA, being of similar age and sharing compatible personalities, grew close and became good friends. But how did their friendship evolve into a same-sex romance and lead to marriage? This shift baffled Lai's mother. In her memory, her son had always liked girls. Just a few months prior, he'd been heartbroken after confessing his feelings to a female classmate and being rejected. So much so that he sought help at the school's counseling center. If Lai's change seemed abrupt, SIA's story was even more unbelievable. After the incident, a young woman came forward, claiming she was SIA's official girlfriend of nearly 2 years. Friends, classmates, and even both sets of parents corroborated their relationship. This raised major questions about the true sexual orientation of both young men. Their marriage seemed almost like a farce. According to Ms. Chun, that morning, Lai received a call from SIA, who said he wanted to teach Lai about real estate and asked him to bring his ID for a meeting. But what was supposed to be a real estate lesson turned into a same-sex marriage registration. Without much thought, they rode a motorcycle to the registry office, not even bothering to change clothes. There were no formal outfits, no wedding rings, no flowers. Not even a proper witness, just a random stranger they pulled off the street. The witness later recalled that the older man, SIA, approached him and said, "We truly love each other, but don't have our family's blessings, nor can we find anyone to witness our marriage. If you support same-sex marriage, could you sign as our witness?" Meanwhile, Lai stood aside, appearing shy and silent. The kind-hearted passerby, a complete stranger, was moved by their story of brave love, defying prejudice, and signed without hesitation. And so, at 9 a.m. that day, they legally became spouses. To celebrate, SIA took Lai to his apartment where they drank in honor of their union. But no one could have foreseen that just 2 hours later, Lai would fall from the 10th floor and die under mysterious circumstances. In terms of timing, SIA may have set a record for the shortest marriage in history, from single to married to widowed in mere hours. More crucially, perhaps was his record for the fastest wealth gain. Since Lai left no L under the law, SIA, as his legal spouse, was entitled to inherit at least 250 million new Taiwan dollars, about 7.95 million. It's fair to say that with such an enormous fortune at stake, some might not just bend their principles. They'd twist themselves into knots to claim it. And SIA wasn't the only one drawn by the allure of this wealth. While Lai's cause of death remained unclear, 4 other Lais emerged, asserting their right to a share. These were the biological children of grandfather Lai, Lai's aunts and uncles by lineage. All 4 claimed their father's wealth had been entirely transferred to their nephew Lai, while they, the second generation, received nothing. No matter how much grandfather Lai favored his grandson, this disparity was excessive, far beyond what favoritism could explain. But as the media dug deeper, they uncovered an even more shocking secret. Lai wasn't actually a grandson. He was grandfather Li's son. Could this case unveil yet another family scandal with grandfather Lai in his old age, succumbing to desire and secretly having an affair with his daughter-in-law? Further investigation revealed that grandfather Lai and his official wife had 3 daughters and 2 sons. However, their second son was intellectually disabled, struggling even with basic self-care, let alone marriage and family life. Finding a spouse for him became a daunting challenge. To solve this, grandfather Lai paid an international matchmaking service to find a wife for his son. In 1999, he spent a large sum to marry an Indonesian woman. After the marriage, she received monthly payments from grandfather Lai. Though called a daughter-in-law, she was more like a hired caretaker for his second son. Yet, not long after, she bore the Lai family a daughter. Driven by an intense desire for a male heir, grandfather Lai hatched a sinister plan to impregnate his daughter-in-law himself to continue the family line. The Indonesian woman fiercely resisted. After repeated harassment and unwanted advances, she was outraged, filing for divorce and taking her daughter to escape the perverse old man's control. But grandfather Lai's depravity didn't end there. Undeterred, he found another woman from mainland China, Ms. Chun, to marry his son. Ms. Chin stayed with the Lai family and gave birth to a boy, Lai, who later inherited the vast fortune. The affair between father-in-law and daughter-in-law came to light in 2006. When grandfather Li's wife caught them in the act. She recounted returning home one day to find the bedroom door locked. Even from outside, she could hear shameful sounds. Suspecting something amiss, she stacked 2 chairs, climbed up, trembling despite the risk, and peered through the ventilation window. The sight stunned her. Her husband was in bed with their daughter-in-law. Fury surged, nearly causing her to fall. Yet, she suppressed her rage, enduring in silence. When Lai was born, she noticed the child bore no resemblance to her disabled son, but looked strikingly like her husband. After feeding Lai one day, she quietly kept the spoon he used and secretly took it to a DNA testing center. Using his saliva sample, the results devastated her. The child had no biological relation to her but was her husband's son. In other words, the man Lai called father was actually his half-brother, and the grandfather he knew was his real father. Betrayed repeatedly, she could no longer tolerate it and filed a lawsuit against grandfather Lai and his daughter-in-law for adultery. While awaiting trial, grandfather Lai decided to go Allen, no longer hiding, he brazenly kicked his wife out of the house. This enraged his other children, those with normal intellect and health, who sided with their mother, condemning him as shameless and a destroyer of moral norms. One daughter sharply mocked, "My child calls you grandfather. So does the child you had with your daughter-in-law call you grandfather, too?" Publicly exposed, grandfather Lai, in a fit of rage, expelled his children from the house. In the end, the vast mansion housed only his disabled son, the daughter-in-law he'd had an affair with, and Lai, the boy who was nominally his grandson, but truly his son. Perhaps due to being shunned by everyone, or swayed by his daughter-in-law's sweet words, grandfather Lai began transferring his entire estate and properties to Lai. Then just a newborn With undeniable DNA evidence, the court convicted grandfather Lai and his daughter-in-law of adultery, sentencing each to 3 months in prison and a fine. Both refused to plead guilty and appealed. At that time, Taiwan's legislative election was fiercely debating whether the criminalization of adultery was unconstitutional. The Lai case coincided with Taiwan's decriminalization of adultery, leading to the case's dismissal and their escape from prison. During the prolonged legal battle, grandfather Lai's disabled second son passed away in 2008. After his son's death, grandfather Lai and his daughter-in-law faced no remaining moral barriers. He even legally adopted Lai, officially changing his status from grandson to son to resolve the issue of legitimacy. He then accelerated the transfer of all assets to Lai, leaving his other children and ex-wife with nothing. This process, though discreet, continued for over a decade. By the time Lai turned 18, the family's entire fortune was in his name, making him a young billionaire. Only then did grandfather Lai feel at ease, knowing the wealth would secure Li's future, and then he truly found eternal peace. In late April 2023, grandfather Lai passed away at 83. Having completed the asset transfers beforehand, he successfully avoided a hefty inheritance tax. But no one could have foreseen that just a week after his death, Lai would follow him into the afterlife. In the end, the 500 million new Taiwan dollar fortune couldn't escape, becoming an inheritance. Reflecting on this, grandfather Li's children sighed, "This is all the karma of the adults." The child was completely innocent. Still, they expressed a desire to let the past rest, no longer wishing to be disturbed by the ordeal. Beyond the sentiment of letting the deceased rest in peace, there was a more practical reason for their decision. Under Taiwan civil law, the order of inheritance prioritizes the spouse, children, parents, and only then siblings. Moreover, Li's siblings were half-siblings through their father, further lowering their priority in the inheritance hierarchy. Even if they fought for the estate and won after deducting legal fees and lawyer costs, the remaining amount would be negligible. Thus, instead of wasting effort on a dispute, Li's siblings chose to let go, seeing it as cutting their losses. However, the two parties most likely to receive the largest shares couldn't easily walk away. Since Lai had no children under inheritance law, his fortune would be split between his legal spouse, SIA, and his mother, Ms. Chin. If nothing changed, they would each receive half. But Ms. Chin refused to accept this. She believed her son was not only deceived into marriage but also murdered. Far from agreeing to split the estate, she wanted SIA imprisoned for taking a life. Miss Chen's argument was this: SIA's father, a real estate lawyer, had handled all the asset transfers for the Lai family. He knew full well that Lai was a billionaire. She claimed he orchestrated a honey trap, encouraging his son to seduce Lai into signing a marriage certificate. Once the goal was achieved, they allegedly pushed Lai off the 10th floor. This theory was supported by a veteran forensic expert named Cao Dessen. With over 30 years of experience and more than 10,000 victim autopsies under his belt, Cao immediately spotted anomalies upon examining Li's body. The first red flag was the landing position. If Lai had truly taken his own life, his body would have followed a small parabolic trajectory, landing at least 3 m from the building. Yet, Lee's body was found just centimeters from the building's edge. However, other forensic experts offered a different hypothesis. They suggested Lee might have stood outside the balcony railing, jumping in a near vertical descent, or perhaps clung to the railing, hanging in mid-air before falling when his strength gave out. In such cases, the fall wouldn't follow a parabolic path. But there was a problem. A rain awning protruded near the second floor of the building. If Lee had fallen vertically from a great height, the impact would have caused his body to rebound outward after hitting the awning. This would make the actual landing position inconsistent with a vertical fall. Considering Lee's height, weight, and the 10-story drop, a self-inflicted jump would have required the precision of an Olympic diver, a world champion, no less, to ensure minimal bodily trauma with only a fractured wrist as the primary injury. Under the family's authorization, Cha Chung obtained Lee's emergency and autopsy reports identifying 4 major points of suspicion. 4 needle marks on the right arm, a dragging mark on the left wrist, a ligature mark on the neck, and bite marks with bruising inside the lip. Teo concluded these injuries occurred before death. The last 2 marks in particular are typically seen in cases of asphyxiation, suggesting Lee may have been strangled, then injected with a drug capable of paralyzing the heart. Once in a coma state, the perpetrator could have pushed him from a lower floor, not the 10th, where SIA was. Neighbors on the 10th floor reported hearing no arguments or sounds of a struggle that day. SIA claimed that after sharing a few drinks, he went to shower. When he returned, Lee was gone and he assumed Lee had gone home, thinking little of it. Curiously, when police arrived at the scene, they saw SIA among the crowd, but he appeared cold and detached. When asked if anyone knew the victim, SIA remained silent, showing no emotion for someone who had just lost their newlywed spouse. Elevator surveillance footage captured the 2 entering the 10th floor around 10 p.m. In the video, Lee scratched his head with his right hand, showing no visible injuries like those later found on his body. Meanwhile, SIA stared tensely at the elevator panel, the 2 exchanging no words or physical contact during the ride. Public pressure mounted, leading the prosecutor's office to release a new forensic report on June 6. The report concluded Lee's death was consistent with a fall from a great height with no evidence of murder. It also refuted each of Chow Adiching's points of suspicion. The official cause of death was severe trauma to the left back from the fall resulting in multiple broken left ribs, bilateral chest hemorrhaging, and significant internal organ damage causing blood loss. The report emphasized that contrary to Tiao's claims, the body had multiple broken ribs and torn organs with substantial bleeding. Additionally, police conducted over 1,000 toxicology tests on Lee's blood, all negative, even for alcohol. The needle marks on his arm were likely from 4 insertions by paramedics during resuscitation efforts, according to the forensic analysis. Similarly, the bite marks inside his mouth and neck bruising were attributed to the emergency procedure, specifically the rough insertion of an endotracheal tube. Police also found fingerprints, DNA, and scratch marks on the outer side of the 10th floor balcony railing, suggesting Lee climbed over but slipped with no external interference. As for the perplexing landing position, police offered an explanation. The rain awning bore marks of a heavy impact and Lee's back had 2 scratches matching the awning's sharp edges. Nearby tree. Branches were also broken, indicating Lai likely hit the awning, bounced off, collided with a branch, and was thrown further before landing near the building. A plausible scenario. Based on this, on June 21, the Taichung District Prosecutor's Office officially closed the case, finding no grounds to prosecute SIA or his father due to a lack of direct evidence of foul play. Yet, far from calming the public, this decision ignited even fiercer debate. Many questioned the scene at SIA's apartment where multiple glasses containing Lai's DNA were found and SIA admitted they drank together. So why less than an hour later did toxicology tests show zero alcohol in Li's blood? No matter how high one's tolerance, the body couldn't metabolize alcohol that quickly. This led some to suspect Li's blood sample had been swapped, resulting in completely negative tests for both alcohol and toxins. Another major doubt was the fall dynamics. Police claimed Lai hit the awning, bounced outward, and fell from the 10th to the 2nd floor with gravitational acceleration. Yet, his spine was undamaged and a logical outcome. Most perplexing of all, why would Lai choose to end his life at this moment? He had just inherited a fortune, gotten married, and had a bright future ahead. If he truly intended to die, why leave no note? There seemed to be no motive or reason for such an act. Amid growing doubts, SIA and his father remained silent for over a month before issuing a brief statement to the media. They emphasized that public speculation didn't reflect the full truth, urging reliance on the judicial investigations findings. They also addressed Li's mother, noting her statement stemmed from a personal perspective and couldn't represent the true facts. Later, some reporters received a letter over 2,000 words long from someone claiming to be an insider familiar with the Lai family. The letter revealed explosive details. Miss Chun had a prior theft conviction, preventing her from obtaining legal residency in Taiwan. To gain legal status, she married the Lai family's second son, who was intellectually disabled. The letter further exposed her affair with her father-in-law. When the truth emerged, DNA tests confirmed Lai was grandfather Li's son, not his grandson. Since Lai wasn't the biological child of the second son, Miss Chen's marriage to him was deemed invalid, nullifying her legal residency in Taiwan. Never having officially married grandfather Lai, she could only stay in Taiwan under the pretext of caring for her son. But after grandfather Lai's death and Lai turning 18, she faced deportation. In other words, whether to secure her son's inheritance or maintain her legal residency, fighting SIA and his father in a legal battle was Ms. Chen's best and perhaps only option. If there was a reason for Lai to end his life, it might stem from the family he was born into. The affair between his mother and grandfather had once caused a public uproar, making Lai a target of ridicule and bullying at school from a young age. He carried the lifelong burden of being the child born from an immoral relationship. After the man he called father, but who was actually his half-brother, passed away, Li's mental state deteriorated further. Despite his intellectual disability, that man had been Li's closest confidant, the only family member with whom he could be open without pressure. In such a family environment, money may have lost its meaning to Lai. Perhaps what he truly desired was escape from his mother's control. It's possible that after a few drinks, or upon hearing subtle hints from his new spouse, he made his final decision. Of course, this is only one side of the story from the informant. In the face of a fortune worth hundreds of millions of new Taiwan dollars, even the purest familial or romantic bonds can't escape suspicion and conspiracy theories. The latest update on the case is that while the prosecutor's office declined to indict SIA and his father, they also declared the marriage between SIA and Lai invalid due to fraudulent registration information. This effectively nullifies SIA's claim to the inheritance. Yet, Li's mother hasn't given up pursuing SIA's accountability. On July 3, 2023, she authorized her lawyer to request a re-investigation of the decision not to prosecute for murder. On July 28, the Taichung High People's Prosecutor's Office reopened the case for further investigation, and it was resubmitted on August 4 after completing the necessary documents. On June 28, 2024, the Taichung District Court found SIA guilty of falsifying documents in a sham marriage with a high school student named Lai, sentencing him to 1 year and 6 months in prison. The sentence couldn't be commuted to a fine, though it was still appealable. On January 23, 2025, the initial court rejected SIA's appeal, upholding the original sentence and proceeding with the trial. On February 3, 2025, SIA was officially detained to serve his sentence. Story 2. In 2018, in a luxurious Vancouver, Canada villa, a Chinese woman of refined elegance was stunned to receive a lawsuit from the court. The man who had once promised to love her was now demanding half her assets despite their never being married. This man, who had entered her life with care and affection, had become the plaintiff in the most expensive legal battle of her life. The house she had painstakingly bought before meeting him. The investments she had accumulated over years now risked being split in half. All because of 2 years of dating. The situation grew even more alarming when every document proved to be perfectly legal. There was no fraud, no legal violation, just a meticulously crafted trap. So, whose side would Canadian law take? Was this man merely an opportunist exploiting a loophole, or was this a premeditated love project designed from the start? This case was shared by an editor who once worked at a Chinese-language newspaper in Vancouver. As someone who frequently answered calls and met with readers, he had plenty of strange events. But this incident left him and his colleagues truly eye-opened. To protect the privacy of the central figure, we'll refer to her as Ms. A. In late 2018, Ms. A approached the newspaper for help. She looked haggard but maintained a defiant air, her voice sharp with anger as she asked, "I just want to know, can I sue him in this situation?" So, who did Ms. want to sue? It turned out Ms. was a quintessential Chinese by femme, a beautiful, wealthy, and elegant woman. In her late 30s, her beauty and figure still radiant, she was divorced. Her ex-husband, a wealthy businessman, had long been surrounded by younger women. Eventually, Ms. was pushed out. As the saying goes, the magpie took the starling's nest. Someone else had taken her place, claiming the retirement ticket she was meant to enjoy. Still, her ex-husband wasn't entirely heartless. He left her a fortune sufficient for a lifetime of luxury. After the divorce, Ms. A and her daughter moved to Vancouver, Canada, settling into a villa in an upscale neighborhood dubbed a paradise for wealthy Chinese. How lavish was this area? Once a thief scaled a wall into a villa using the gardener's ladder to sneak inside. He didn't even need to crack a safe, just grabbed a few items from a room and walked away with jewelry and vintage watches worth about $500,000 Canadian dollars. Approximately $350,000 US in 2018. Despite the sizable Chinese community, neighbors here rarely formed close bonds. They used English names, seldom mentioning their real ones. If a curious newcomer asked, "What did the previous owner of this villa do? Where are they from?" the response was typically silence or a cold shrug. Most who came to Vancouver shared a common desire to leave their past unknown. In this detached atmosphere, only the Filipino housekeepers enjoyed gossiping. They'd gather in the park, swapping Chinese recipes and sharing inside scoop about their employers. One spring day in 2015, Ms. Zay's housekeeper returned from the park unusually excited, telling her employer, "I just met a European architect. He's looking for historic homes to sketch. He loves the old architectural styles in West Vancouver and is willing to pay a fee to any homeowner who lets him draw their property." For some reason, the moment Ms. A heard this offer, she immediately agreed. The first meeting took place the next morning after Ms. A's daughter left for school. A sleek Audi pulled up to the villa's gate and out stepped a tall, handsome Western man. As he approached, Ms. A thought to herself, startled, "Why does he look like Prince Harry? Or do all European men have this aristocratic air?" The man flashed a polite smile, bowed slightly, and introduced himself. "Hello, I'm Phil, an architect. I love the style of homes in this area. I'll need about 2 to 3 days to sketch your house." "Thank you for agreeing." Ms. caught a few familiar words like architecture and heritage enough to grasp his intent. Not wanting to seem flustered, she smiled brightly and warmly invited him inside. That day, Ms. mustered all her limited English to chat with Phil. He enthusiastically opened his car trunk, pulling out a set of drawing tools, explaining as he worked. "The neighbor's house is Georgian style, while yours has a Victorian flair. This area is truly a living architectural museum." Ms. didn't understand much, but in her eyes, the image of a man so dedicated to his craft became strangely captivating. And so what was bound to happen did. When Phil finished the sketches, he didn't just bring a portfolio of drawings. He brought a large bouquet of roses to confess his feelings. And thus, they began dating. Ms. S. daughter quickly grew fond of Phil. The girl had long yearned for a real father figure, someone to teach her how to ride a bike, take her camping on weekends, not a mother who always drove her to fancy restaurants or movie theaters in glamorous dresses. Phil seemed like a man straight out of the mother and daughter's dreams. He held all sorts of licenses: hunting, fishing, motorbike riding. He knew every trail, every stream in Vancouver, taking them on adventures from thrilling mountain hikes to starry forest campouts. Compared to the Chinese men Ms. had known, often highly intelligent and well-educated, but clumsy and practical life. Taking hours just to change a light bulb, Phil was like a modern caveman. Strong and rugged, he could pitch a tent and build a fire with ease. Miss didn't need to lift a finger. She'd simply sit by the campfire, listening to the crackling wood, basking in overwhelming happiness. Yet, At times, Mise felt a lack of deep connection due to their differing tastes in music or movies. Phil wasn't the type to whisper sweet nothings, but his actions always touched her. Once he rented a wood floor cleaner and polished her house to a shine, a job gardening companies had quoted exorbitant prices for. Another afternoon he used chemicals to scrub the moss-covered driveway, a task Ms. had long dreaded to her. Back then, love didn't need to be the stuff of romance novels. A man willing to care for her, her daughter, and her home. That was enough. One day, Phil candidly told her, "I work for a design firm downtown. I'm currently renting an apartment nearby, but my lease is about to expire. I'm looking for a new place to stay." Hearing this, Ms. thought to herself, why do Westerners always prefer renting? They could save up to buy, yet they choose to live under someone else's roof. It's baffling. But as Phil shared more about his situation, for reasons she couldn't quite explain, she blurted out, "My house is spacious. Why don't you move in for a while? We can see if we're a good fit." What seemed like a casual suggestion was met with an immediate nod from Phil. And just like that, he moved in, bringing little with him, but breathing new life into the once cold villa of Ms. A and her daughter. Soon after, Phil seamlessly blended into Ms. A's life, becoming an indispensable part of her social gatherings. At every event, his friendliness and humor made him the center of attention. But what made Ms. Zay's friends green with envy was a small gesture. Whenever she reached for her wallet to pay, Phil would beat her to it, swiftly grabbing the bill, paying with his card, and carefully pocketing the receipt. Her friends remarked, "At least when it comes to spending, Phil isn't the typical Western split-everything type. Compared to your stingy ex-husband, who even went about to inherit a fortune, dragged his wife to a law office to sign a no-claim-to-assets agreement, Phil is incredibly generous." Indeed, despite his modest salary, Phil never pried into Ms. A's ex-husband, her wealth, or her income sources. From the moment he moved in, he quietly shared the financial burden. Each month, Phil used e-transfer, a popular payment method in Canada, to cover expenses with meticulous care, attaching clear notes like 1,500 Canadian dollars for your daughter's school fees, $500 Canadian for groceries, $1,800 Canadian for gutter cleaning, $2,500 Canadian for clothes for you and your daughter. In total, Phil willingly contributed around $3,000 to $4,000 Canadian dollars monthly to Ms. A's family without ever needing a reminder. Ms. A and her friends agreed. Love isn't measured by money, but if a man isn't willing to share materially, his sincerity is questionable. Phil proved his love through actions, not words. Though his contributions were modest compared to Ms. A's spending, what mattered was that he gave most of his limited income to her and her daughter. That spoke volumes. From 2015 to 2017, those 2 years were filled with happiness. The family of 3 lived harmoniously in the warm villa. As Ms. A's daughter entered her teenage years, becoming moody and defiant, Phil didn't stand idly by. He told the girl, "You can't yell at your mom like that. She's my love." Beyond that, he patiently tutored her, correcting her grammar mistakes after she received an I in progress, a euphemism for failing. At school. At one point, the girl even whispered to her mother, "Mom, when you're cooking, Uncle Phil watches you closely, worried the oil might splatter and burn you. I believe he truly loves you." Moreover, tax season had always been a headache for Ms. A with her chaotic pile of receipts requiring an accountant. But with Phil, everything changed. He organized every document, filled out forms precisely, and when the tax agency's results came back, Ms. couldn't believe her eyes, exclaiming, "My goodness, your calculations match theirs exactly." Phil simply shrugged, explaining calmly, "Westerners are taught about taxes and financial management from a young age. Many Chinese people, rich or poor, often struggle with this system." Phil also knew the villa inside out, more so than Ms. A, despite her years living there. While she didn't even know where the main water valve was, he handled everything from plumbing repairs to garden care. Before, despite alarms and a housekeeper, Ms. always felt uneasy. Because the villa's glass doors lacked bars, leaving her without a sense of complete safety. But since Phil moved in, that insecurity vanished. Her friends couldn't help but gush, "Phil is so capable and well educated. You're so lucky. Why not marry him and have another child?" Those playful comments melted Ms. Day's heart, especially when she recalled meeting Phil's friends, successful, stable people who welcomed her with respect and warmth. During those gatherings, despite her basic English, one word always stood out. Mrs. Phil's friends called her that. Perhaps they had long seen her as his legal wife. That recognition fueled her dreams of a vibrant future with her boyfriend. Everything felt like a dream until a fateful day. That day, Ms. and Phil attended a party. One of Phil's friends arrived with an elegant Chinese woman dressed in traditional attire, exuding wealth and refinement. With one glance, Ms. A instantly recognized her kind, a woman from the same social class with a similar background and circumstances. This detail might seem ordinary at first, but upon reflection, it sends chills down the spine. If you haven't noticed anything amiss yet, keep it in mind. By the end of the story, everything will become clear. In their 2 years together, Phil transformed Ms. A's life. Once confined to her home, coffee dates, or shopping trips, she now hunted, kayaked, and strolled beneath cherry blossoms. Together, they savored picture-perfect moments. But then one day, Phil abruptly announced, "I've been laid off by the architecture firm. I'm going back to Spain to start my own business." At first, Ms. was secretly relieved, thinking his salary wasn't much anyway. Starting a business in his home country might be better. But that relief quickly vanished. Phil left with a chilling coldness. He returned his leased Audi, packed his things with just a few words, and showed no hesitation. He departed like a transient traveler, leaving behind an empty house and the feeling that everything had been a beautiful dream for Ms. A. Still, she clung to hope. "When my daughter's summer break starts, I'll visit Phil in Spain, meet his family, and discuss our future." However, a nightmare descended before her dream could take shape. Just 2 weeks after Phil's departure, a stranger appeared at Ms. A's door holding a stack of documents. A cold voice declared, "Ms. A, this is a family lawsuit filed against you." She froze. At first, she thought her ex-husband was stirring trouble again, but the words family lawsuit pierced her heart. Family with whom? She had never married in Canada. Who could sue her under the guise of family? Her trembling hands flipped through the pages, the words blurring through her tears. Her daughter quickly took the documents, trying to stay calm, saying, "Mom, go inside. I'll sign for this." That night, as darkness fell, her daughter quietly consulted a dictionary, translating each line of the lawsuit. The air grew colder with every moment. As the truth unfolded page by page, Ms. was stunned to discover that the person suing her was Phil. He had filed the lawsuit under a common law relationship, claiming they had lived together as an unmarried couple. In the suit, Phil demanded a division of assets accumulated during their time together. A share of the hundreds of thousands of Canadian dollars in annual dividends Ms. received, money from her ex-husband's alimony, and a portion of the increased value of her upscale Vancouver villa, one of the city's most expensive properties. Estimates suggest that between 2016 and 2017, Vancouver's housing market soared. Villas in West Vancouver appreciated by at least $300,000 to $400,000 Canadian dollars annually. Phil had calculated meticulously based on a 34% value increase over 2 years, roughly $1 million Canadian dollars. He demanded fees including $500,000 Canadian dollars from the villa's appreciation and monthly alimony akin to a divorce settlement. Hearing these outrageous demands, Ms. was dumbfounded. The house had clearly been bought by her ex-husband, and the dividends were his alimony. Phil had never contributed. How could he claim a share? They were just dating. How had it turned into a divorce? Requiring a court battle? The question gnawed at her mind. Her daughter, the most level-headed, immediately warned, "Mom, we need a lawyer now. If we don't respond to the lawsuit, the court will rule in Phil's favor." They rushed to the police station, hoping to report Phil for fraud. But after hearing the story, the officer responded coldly, "This is a civil lawsuit. You need to file a counterclaim. This isn't a criminal case we can accept." Turned away, Ms. A felt as if she'd fallen into an abyss of despair. She called, texted, and emailed Phil repeatedly, hoping for clarity. But all she received was a curt message. "Everything is with my lawyer. If you keep contacting me, I'll report you for harassment." Feeling cornered, Nay sought out a Chinese lawyer charging $380 Canadian dollars per hour, approximately $266 US. The lawyer listened intently, then frowned at a key detail. Phil had moved in during 2015 and left in 2017, exactly 2 years. Moreover, he had consistently contributed to household expenses and filed joint tax returns annually. Leaning back in his chair, the lawyer spoke slowly but sharply. Under Canadian law, if two people live together as a couple for 2 years or more, or less, if they have a child together, they're considered in a common law relationship, an unregistered marriage. When they separate, asset division is treated just like a divorce. M went silent, then exclaimed, "So, he scammed me. Why doesn't the law protect me? I thought as long as we didn't register a marriage or put his name on the deed, I'd be safe." The lawyer sighed, replying, "Phil planned this carefully. he stayed exactly 2 years to legitimize his claim. The money he sent you, the joint tax filings, all of it is evidence in his favor. Ms. couldn't believe her ears. The lawyer continued, the house, though bought before Phil, had appreciated during their cohabitation, and that increase could be split. The dividends, despite being alimony from her ex, were considered joint income during their time together, so Phil could claim a portion, and the legal fees would be substantial. Fighting the lawsuit could cost Ms. tens of thousands of Canadian dollars in lawyer fees. Many immigrants don't realize that in Canada, cohabitation can be as risky as marriage. After enough time, half your assets can be divided, even without a marriage certificate. Everything stocks, real estate, any asset that grows in value during cohabitation is considered joint. For example, if a house was worth 250,000 Canadians when they started living together and rose to $450,000 Canadian by the time they parted, Phil could claim $100,000 Canadian, 50% of the appreciation. Before seeing her out, the lawyer remarked, "This guy knows the law well. Last year, my office handled a female client with a story identical to yours." Ms. A froze, asking, what was the outcome of that case, but the lawyer fell silent. A chill ran down their spines. Could Phil and his friends be running a love project, exploiting legal loopholes to target wealthy women and walk away with half their assets? Was the Chinese woman in traditional attire from the party his next victim? The mother and daughter consulted other lawyers, but all agreed. With Phil unemployed and a set list, the court would likely force Ms. A to split her assets and even pay him monthly alimony. Though the amount wouldn't be large due to the short cohabitation, it was still a significant loss. Phil had meticulously prepared evidence to prove his entitlement, providing e-transfer records of contributions to education and home maintenance, arguing their relationship was more than just dating. It was marital in nature. Moreover, on his tax filings, Phil had listed Ms. A as a common law partner, a detail she had completely overlooked. When the lawyer asked, "How did you address each other? What did friends call you both?" Ms. A palled, recalling how what once felt like sweet signs were now evidence against her. Her close friends always called Phil your man, and invitations from Phil's friends were addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Each word had unwittingly affirmed their relationship, now serving as legal proof to force Ms. Day to divide her assets. Fearing that revealing everything might lead lawyers to reject her case, Ms. A turned to the media. She hoped to warn the community. A common law relationship isn't just about love. It's a legal trap that can take half your fortune just for living together for 2 years. But her efforts were in vain. Emails sent by the newsroom to Phil bounced back. As she left the newspaper office, Ms. A gripped her daughter's hand tightly, as if clinging to a lifeline in a storm. Her voice broke. "It's clearly a scam. How can this be a legal lawsuit? Is Canadian law encouraging asset division through schemes like this?" Legally, Phil hadn't broken any laws. He simply viewed their relationship and cohabitation as akin to a marriage. And under Canadian law, separation meant a legal division of assets, just like a divorce. This also highlights a deep cultural divide. 80% of Westerners sign agreements before cohabiting, clearly defining assets like a business partnership. In contrast, many Chinese people avoid discussing money, seeing it as unromantic and pragmatic. Had Ms. signed a contract stating Phil had no claim to her assets, she could have avoided this disaster. And if Phil had refused to sign, he might have left to find another, more naive target. This strengthens the theory that Phil wasn't a mere opportunist, but a calculated predator. When the reporter covering Ms. A's story tried to look up the lawsuit's outcome, no records were found. Likely, Ms. A settled, agreeing to share a portion of her assets to avoid a prolonged battle. A trial could cost $6,000 Canadian dollars per day, approximately $4,200. Not including lawyer fees. Phil may have deliberately dragged out the process, forcing Ms. A into financial exhaustion until she accepted his terms. A costly lesson emerges from this case. If love seems too perfect, it might hide risks. Phil's generosity and care may have been tools to access Ms. A's wealth. The law can't protect the naive. Though Phil exploited a legal loophole, Ms. A couldn't fight back due to her lack of knowledge about Canada's legal system. This story is a wake-up call. Love requires sincerity, but not at the expense of reason. Don't shy away from discussing finances or even drafting agreements if needed. Set clear boundaries instead of letting blind romance lead you into a trap set by someone like Phil. Cunning, calculated, and always one step ahead. Story 3. In the fall of 2014, amidst the desolate frost-covered wilderness of Yellowknife, a city dubbed Canada's Aurora Paradise, a Japanese tourist named Itsumi Yasukubo vanished without a trace. The woman, known for her gentle, reserved, and polite demeanor, left behind neatly packed luggage in her hotel, a round-trip plane ticket, and then disappeared into the depths of the forest as if she had never existed. Initially, all theories pointed to an unfortunate accident during her quest to see the northern lights. An unprecedented large-scale search operation was launched, but just 4 days later, the search abruptly halted. Both the Royal Canadian Mounted Police (RCMP) and the media fell eerily silent. Nearly a year later, when her remains were discovered, chilling questions began to surface. Did she willingly walk into that forest, never intending to return, or was there an unseen force lurking in the northern darkness? In October 2014, at the Explorer Hotel in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, Canada, Japanese tourist Itsumi Yasukubo had been staying for 5 days. On her scheduled checkout day, she neither checked out nor requested an extension. The front desk staff remembered her as an elegant female doctor, well-dressed, soft-spoken, and looking younger than her 45 years. Initially, the hotel wasn't overly concerned. Yellowknife, with its stunning landscapes and pleasant atmosphere, often saw guests extend their stays, especially during the offs when rooms were available and the hotel had her credit card on file. But by October 27, Itsumi was still absent. Housekeeping reported her room had a do not disturb sign for days. At this point, the hotel manager grew suspicious, fearing something had happened to her. Upon checking the room, they found no one. Her luggage was open. Personal items still inside. The manager began calling her repeatedly while reviewing security footage. Though this incident occurred 11 years ago, the challenges of staying connected while traveling abroad remain a constant. Concern, much like today. Expensive roaming fees, weak phone signals, unstable Wi-Fi, and the often time-consuming process of buying a SIM card at the airport. Unable to reach its Sumi, the hotel contacted the travel agency in Toronto that had facilitated her booking. After several attempts, they finally connected with her family in Japan, discovering she hadn't returned home as planned. Security footage captured her last moments leaving the hotel on October 22 with no record of her returning. The RCMP was notified and searched her room, finding her passport and return ticket in the safe. A missing person alert was immediately broadcast on the radio, and her photo was posted around Yellowknife. During the hotel room search, police found a souvenir mug featuring a forest and aurora design along with a receipt from the Midnight Sun shop dated October 19. They traced this lead to the store where an employee vividly recalled the petite woman in a pink, puffy jacket and matching hat looking stylish and eye-catching. She had asked if the mug was microwave safe, intending to use it back in Japan. Additionally, after reviewing the town's surveillance cameras, police pieced together at Sunumi's movements, leaving the shop, strolling through the commercial district, and stopping at a tourism office to book an aurora tour. However, since it was the off-season and there weren't enough people to form a group, the staff suggested a private guide. The high cost disappointed her. She also declined other activities like dog sledding, ice fishing, or hiking, ultimately leaving without booking anything. Over the next 2 days, cameras captured Atsumi each morning in her pink jacket, camera in hand, taking photos around town, and returning to the hotel by afternoon. But after October 22, she never came back. Reports confirmed at least 2 witnesses saw her that day. The first witness, Carrie, a former RCMP officer, was driving on Ingram Trail around 11:30 a.m. when she spotted Atsumi walking alone. Her pink jacket stood out against the pristine wilderness, catching cars' attention. Initially, Carrie considered stopping to check on her, but seeing Atsumi's calm expression, warm clothing, and cameras seemingly just out for a walk, she drove on without interrupting. The second witness, Sonia, a tour bus driver specializing in aurora trips, also saw Atsumi walking alone on the same road. Based on her direction, Sonia believed Atsumi might be heading toward Jackfish Lake, a popular spot for fishing and photography not too far away. These two became the last people to see her alive. Police confirmed that Sunumi was still alive on October 22. But from that day until October 27, when the hotel reported her missing, 5 days had passed. The weather, though early fall, had already turned snowy. Nighttime temperatures ranged from -5 degrees Celsius to -10 degrees Celsius, while daytime hovered around 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. For someone without survival experience, food, or water, getting lost in the forest for over 24 hours was extremely dangerous. The police launched a massive search operation. Helicopters, tracking dogs, and nearly the entire force were mobilized. Even local hunters joined in. The largest missing person search in northwest Canada's history had begun. News of the mysterious disappearance of a Japanese doctor in Canada spread rapidly, shocking both Japan and Canada. On October 30, just 2 days after confirming Atsumi Yoshikubo's disappearance, A reporter from the U.S. branch of MIC News flew to Yellowknife. Soon after, major Japanese newspapers like Asahi Shimbun and Yomiuri Shimbun sent teams to the scene. Canadian outlets such as CBC and CTV followed suit, dispatching reporters to the northern region. In a short time, Yellowknife, a town of fewer than 20,000 people, buzzed with activity. Reporters with cameras and interview teams accompanied by translators were everywhere. The hotel where Itsumai had stayed quickly ran out of rooms. Why did the Japanese take such intense interest in a single missing tourist? From their media's perspective, that Sumi's disappearance wasn't just another missing person case. She was a female doctor with beauty, education, and a promising future. A triple ideal archetype suddenly vanishing in a foreign land. This struck a chord of sorrow and captured immense public attention in Japan. Moreover, for many Japanese, Yellowknife is the Aurora Sanctuary, a must-visit destination. The auroras here are even tied to a mystical fertility energy. A disappearance beneath the radiant northern lights. For a people who believe in legends of hidden gods stirred a deep inexpressible fear. The Japanese have a profound spiritual connection to the aurora. In their folklore, the ethereal lights are traces of deities and wishes made beneath them come true. In the early 90s, an American TV series Northern Exposure titled Bakwak Fongvan in Japan sparked a craze. The show followed a New York doctor working in Alaska. Despite its all-American production, the stunning snowy landscapes and American humor resonated with Japanese audiences. The aurora, featured in nearly every episode, became a symbol of romance and pure beauty. Later, anime reinforced the belief that seeing the aurora brings lifelong happiness, and children conceived beneath it would be healthy and beautiful. Many newlyweds chose Arctic honeymoons, hoping to create angels under the aurora. Travel agencies capitalized on this, offering aurora bedroom packages with glass ceilings. Whatever the reason, Japan's fascination with the aurora grew. Not just newlyweds, but singles sought aurora fate to find true love. While the elderly believed the mysterious lights could dispel illness and extend life. Frankly, even without legends, the aurora remains a breathtaking natural wonder. Its colors aren't just green, but also purple and red depending on magnetic field strength, solar particle intensity, and light refraction. The aurora's appearance can even differ between the naked eye and photos depending on exposure. Seeing it requires not just the right location, but also luck. Even in the Arctic, weeks might pass without a sighting. Yet, sometimes in a single night, the aurora dances across the sky, creating an unforgettable spectacle. Statistics show Yellowknife offers 240 nights annually to view the aurora with the naked eye. Not only is its frequency exceptional, but its clarity is also world-class. NASA has even called Yellowknife the best aurora viewing town in the world, alongside Whitehorse in Canada's Yukon. Yellowknife is considered one of the country's twin aurora gems. Thanks to this reputation, Yellowknife attracts around 120,000 tourists annually from across the globe, 6 times its permanent population. Of these, about 10% are visitors from Japan. Etsumai Yashikabo was one such pilgrim to this aurora haven. She chose late October for her trip, not peak tourist season, but a transitional time when longer nights increase the chances of seeing the northern lights. Additionally, the lakes hadn't fully frozen, allowing the aurora to reflect on the water, a spectacle unavailable in deep winter or early spring. Etsamai Yashakubo had likely prepared meticulously for this journey. During her layover in Toronto, she purchased a long pink puffy jacket and a matching warm hat. What she couldn't anticipate, however, was the low tourist turnout, which prevented her from joining Aurora tours. As mentioned, seeing the aurora requires some luck. Though Yellowknife is an ideal spot, tourists often need guides, light hunters with deep local knowledge, especially indigenous experts. These guides rely on wind, clouds, moonlight, and stars to predict the aurora's movement. Thus, police theorized that Etsunumai, unable to find a suitable tour, and finding private guides too costly, decided to hunt for the aurora on her own. This might explain why she was seen walking toward a lake on the outskirts, a spot known for frequent aurora sightings. Perhaps she planned to wait for darkness to test her luck. But when the search team scoured the area around the lake, they found no trace of her. Beyond lay a vast primal forest, rarely visited except by local hunters. Searching for someone there was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Beyond the risk of getting lost, another danger loomed: black bears. In this region, bears outnumber people. Typically, these animals are docile. But if Etsamai inadvertently entered their territory, the consequences could be dire, especially since bears were storing fat for hibernation. Police and local volunteers repeatedly ventured into the forest to search. Meanwhile, reporters remaining in town heard a chilling legend from elderly Inuit, also known as Eskimo, community members. An elder shared with the journalist that the aurora represents the spirits of ancestors and the deceased dancing in the night sky. If you listen closely, you might hear a faint click-clack, the sound of spirits playing soccer with human skulls. Inuit children are warned from a young age not to whistle while watching the aurora, as the sound could make the lights descend, growing brighter until they form a rope that snatches the child's soul away. Some Yukon tribes believe the aurora embodies the spirits of those who died with unresolved grievances, wandering forests or deserts to find a replacement. Staring into the mesmerizing glow could enchant you, leading to disorientation, getting lost, or falling into an abyss without a trace. Though it sounds far-fetched, Japanese reporters couldn't help but shudder after hearing the tale. To them, wasn't this the hidden gods? In Japanese mythology, hidden gods refer to those taken by deities. Everything has a spirit, and gods inhabit a separate realm, divided by magical barriers. Anyone summoned or who stumbles into that world vanishes from the mortal plane, leaving no trace. Etsamai Yashikobo's disappearance seemed to mirror every detail of the hidden gods legend, except this time the guiding spirit hailed from Canada. Naturally, the police dismissed spiritual explanations, focusing on practical scenarios. Etsamai got lost in the forest, fell into the lake, or was attacked by a bear. All bleak possibilities. But a more sinister theory emerged. She might have encountered foul play from the start. Police hadn't ruled out abduction. In Japan, many hidden gods cases involve criminal acts. Yellowknife is generally peaceful, but recent years saw a spike in alcohol and drug addiction among local youth, particularly indigenous individuals. Theft, brawls, street racing, and emerging criminal gangs were on the rise. Many hunters here own guns, and police struggled with their readiness to shoot over trivial disputes. Men often turned to violence, alcohol, and drugs, while women became victims. 2 years prior, police had dismantled a human trafficking ring, targeting indigenous girls who were taken to larger cities and forced into prostitution. These victims often lacked identification and had limited education, making them easy targets for criminals. Though Itsamai wasn't indigenous, her petite frame and facial features bore some resemblance to local women. If someone saw her walking alone, they might have mistaken her for a runaway and abducted her. If true, finding her would be more challenging than ever. As rumors spread and the search spanned far and wide, answers remained elusive. Yet, on November 4, just 4 days after the massive search officially began, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, abruptly announced its suspension. At the subsequent press conference, a police spokesperson revealed they had found a letter in Itsamai's hotel room addressed to a friend in Japan. Based on the letter's contents and their investigation into background in Japan, the police concluded she had intentionally ventured into the wilderness outside Yellowknife, with the purpose of voluntarily becoming a missing person. The phrase voluntarily becoming a missing person left both Japanese and Canadian media baffled. The police stated that Itsamai had come to Yellowknife with a premeditated plan to disappear into the wilderness, ensuring no one could find her. They declined to disclose the letter's details, citing privacy concerns, but affirmed she had expressed a clear intent to vanish and erase her tracks. Many, however, didn't buy this conclusion. If Itsamai had written the letter and disappeared in Tokyo, it might suggest she wanted to escape her current life and start anew elsewhere. But for a lone woman to leave the city and step into a frigid wilderness, the outcome seemed singular. Voluntarily becoming a missing person sounded like a euphemism for ending her life. Japan's Fuji TV interviewed Itsamai's brother, who revealed that after her disappearance, Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs contacted the family confirming that Tsunami had written a letter to a female friend hinting at ending her life in Canada. However, he had never read its full contents as its Sumi had been estranged from the family for years. Still, he disagreed with the police's conclusion. If she had truly planned this, why buy a round-trip ticket? And why purchase souvenirs for friends? Even asking the shop clerk if they could be brought back to Japan. The last person to see it, Tsunami, driver Kari, also raised doubts. After learning of the disappearance, Kari deeply regretted not overcoming her social anxiety to stop and offer her a ride. As a former RCMP officer, Kari recalled that Itsamai looked healthy and in good spirits that day, not like someone with dark intentions. Even if Tsunami had such intentions, a single letter shouldn't rule out abduction or trafficking. Such a hasty conclusion seemed reckless and irresponsible. This sparked another theory. The early end to the investigation might have been to protect the upcoming Aurora tourism season. Whether Itsamai got lost, was attacked by a bear, or was abducted, any of these scenarios could make tourists view Yellowknife as unsafe, prompting them to choose other destinations. But if the cause was her choice to leave the world, the impact on tourism would be minimal. In fact, that year, local tourism wasn't harmed. It even saw an uptick fueled by hidden gods rumors. Many Japanese visited Yellowknife out of curiosity to chase the mystical but authorities worried this could backfire, turning the area into a sanctuary for those wanting to disappear. Hence, they opted for the vague phrasing of voluntarily becoming a missing person. Meanwhile, volunteers, including Carrie, continued searching the outskirts forests until a major blizzard swept through, erasing all traces and forcing them to stop. Time passed until September 2015, when a hiking couple discovered fabric scraps and what appeared to be human bones in a dense forest north of Yellowknife, a place rarely visited. Terrified, they immediately alerted the police. Authorities determined the remains belonged to a young woman, but the body had been heavily scavenged by wildlife and decomposed, leaving only scattered bone fragments, making the cause of death indeterminable. However, after reconstructing the fabric remnants, they found the color matched the pink puffy jacket Itsumi Yasukubo was wearing when she disappeared. The RCMP then traveled to Japan to collect DNA samples from Itsumi's father and brother for identification. Finally, in April 2016, police officially confirmed the remains were Yasukubo's, the woman who had vanished earlier. Her cause of death was attributed to an accident, possibly getting lost in the forest and succumbing to hypothermia or an attack by a bear. According to police, the site where the remains were found was less than 5 kilometers from the lakeside road where Itsumi was last seen within the area the search team had covered. Given her bright clothing, spotting her in the forest shouldn't have been difficult. This only deepened the mystery of her fate. Could an unseen force truly have spirited her away? Sadly, that secret may remain buried forever in Yellowknife's dense wilderness. In 2017, Canada CBC produced a documentary titled Missing Tourist. Reporters traveled to Japan to interview Itsumi's brother, former colleagues, teachers, patients, and other acquaintances, hoping to shed light on her death. However, what they uncovered revealed a hidden chapter of her life. Itsumi Yasukubo was born in Udo, Kumamoto Prefecture, into a wealthy family. Her father owned a private hospital and, given her background, expected his children to pursue medicine to inherit the family legacy. A high school teacher recalled Itsumi as a quiet, introspective and diligent student driven to pass medical school entrance exams to honor her parents. She succeeded gaining admission to a medical school in Kumamoto. Initially, she aimed to become a surgeon but later switched to psychology. After earning her license as a psychiatrist, she returned to work at her father's hospital. Her father, however, was disappointed, believing only surgery qualified one as a real doctor. Still, he gave her a private office on the hospital's 4th floor. Itsumi was a skilled doctor with deep empathy and a gentle demeanor, earning her patients' admiration. Some even drove hours for her treatment. Colleagues adored her, describing her as both beautiful and kind. She often brought back gifts from her travels, fostering strong relationships. To many, she embodied the ideal successful woman, a stable career, high income, and frequent international trips. But a turning point came when she abandoned everything to move to Tokyo alone, severing ties with her conservative father. Why Tokyo? Her brother speculated it might have been for a man. Despite her outwardly reserved nature, Tatsumi had a passionate side. She loved rock music and was an ardent fan of a band's lead singer. She moved to Tokyo to pursue her idle, and they were together for several years, with her boyfriend's income from performances being unstable at Sunamai. Covered most living expenses. But their relationship was fraught with petty arguments. Meanwhile, Tokyo's cutthroat competition drained her. She initially worked at a large hospital, but ostracized by internal cliques was forced to resign. She then took a job at a suburban hospital, but the hours-long commute exhausted her further. Eventually she could only do charitable in-home therapy, treating patients unable to leave their homes, significantly reducing her income. A struggling life, stalled career, and turbulent romance pushed its Sunamai into depression. Some wondered, as a psychiatrist, how could she succumb to depression? But psychiatrists are among the professions with the highest depression rates. Beyond work stress, they absorb patients' negative energy like sponges when treating severe mental health issues. As the saying goes, when you gaze into the abyss gazes back. Psychiatrists constantly teeter on that edge where a single misstep can lead to a fall. Etsumi fell into the very abyss, a healer unable to heal herself. During this time, her brother and friends urged her to return home, but she refused, unwilling to be seen as a failure. A woman in her 40s, returning empty-handed after leaving for the big city. Maintaining her pride was only part of it. More crucially, she couldn't face the father she'd estranged from 4 years. Amid this inner turmoil and external pressure, Etsumi booked a flight to Yellowknife, Canada, hoping to see the aurora she'd always dreamed of before ending her life. Perhaps initially the thought was just a flicker. She hadn't fully committed, hence the round-trip ticket and souvenirs for friends. But once lost in the forest, gazing at the aurora, dancing like a magical ballet, she may have been mesmerized by nature's force, making her suppressed desire for release clearer than ever. She might have thought dissolving into the vast wilderness was a beautiful way to go. So she abandoned calling for help, abandoned saving herself, leading to her tragic end. Of course, these are mere speculations. No one can know for sure. We often hear advice like, if you're depressed, go for a walk. Fresh air helps. But few realize that solitary trips can sometimes worsen the condition, not heal it. Professor Simon Hatcher, a psychiatry expert at the University of Ottawa, said in an interview, some people wander the wilderness for extended periods to escape reality, subconsciously testing themselves against death. In desolate, isolated spaces, feelings of detachment and suppression grow, amplified by harsh weather. This can intensify the give up to keep walking forever until life ends. Without someone to pull them back, as those who passed at Sunamai failed to stop and help, it's like the last life boy being swept away from a drowning person. Her unexplained departure may simply be a tragedy of untreated depression. In Miyazaki's animated film, Chihiro returns to the human world, thanks to Haku and Kanashi. In real life, those lost in the dark inner world also need professional help, and the loving embrace of family or friends to escape their own hidden gods. Etsumi. Yoshikobubo's mysterious disappearance and death shocked many, not just for its eerie circumstances. A Japanese psychiatrist vanishing silently in Canada's wilderness, but also for raising deeper questions about mental health, modern loneliness, and the limits of empathy. This story prompts reflection. Even those who help others, like psychiatrists, can be silently consumed by their own pain. Family pressures, career stress, unfulfilled love, and a lack of mental health support drove her to the edge. Etsamai's story is a haunting wake-up call. Beneath a seemingly strong exterior may lie unseen loneliness and fear. In an increasingly modern society, people can feel more isolated in a crowd. Timely care, listening, and support might be the life ebb for struggling souls like Etsamai Yasikubo. Story 4. In April 2016, all German media turned their attention to a case that sent shockwaves through the public. A house of horrors had reportedly been uncovered just days earlier. Inside, investigators found evidence that women had been abused before being incinerated in a wood stove, where traces of DNA were discovered. The homeowners who presented themselves to neighbors as siblings were Angelica and Wilfried Wagner. One deemed highly intelligent, even psychopathic by experts, the other intellectually disabled with the IQ of a child. What had happened inside this house? How horrific was it? How many women had fallen into the couple's clutches? And more crucially, how many had met their end in that wood stove? Today's case unfolds in a rural area tucked away in western Germany in the province of Westphalia-Lippig. Höxter, a small town so quaint you could traverse its center in the blink of an eye. Surrounding Höxter are vast fields and rolling hills steeped in solitude. Young people in Höxter often seek the vibrancy of nearby cities like Enhof, Bayfield, or Dortmund on weekends, as there's little in Höxter to hold their interest. Just beyond Höxter, nestled even deeper in that stillness lies Bosborn, a village so tiny you've likely never heard of it. More isolated than Höxter, it's home to just a few hundred residents. So obscure is Bosborn that when the horrific case we're about to explore broke, it was dubbed the Höxter House of Horrors, overshadowing the existence of poor Bosborn entirely. But that illusion of peace shattered on a fateful April day. On April 27, 2016, a house in Bosborn was suddenly swarmed by investigators. Police cars screeched to a halt out front, sirens blaring. Men hurriedly set up barricades and large tarps, concealing the yard. Neighbors watched in shock, unable to fathom what was happening. What had disrupted Bosborn's quiet so drastically? As the door of the house in Bosborn creaked open under the scrutiny of the law, a horrifying, sinister truth emerged. This was no ordinary home. It was a true house of horrors, a living hell where innocent women had endured unimaginable suffering. Stepping inside revealed a filthy, damp space with traces of captivity and abuse everywhere. In the frigid bathroom, investigators were horrified to find dried blood mixed with excrement, flakes of skin, and clumps of brittle hair. Even more chilling, human DNA was detected in the chimney. A gruesome remnant of bodies cruelly burned. Deeper within, behind crumbling walls, a dark basement came into view. Undoubtedly, the site where victims were held and tortured. Investigators worked tirelessly, meticulously sealing every piece of evidence, piecing together the horrific fragments of truth. Meanwhile, the two inhabitants of this house, who had lived there for a decade, posing as siblings, were arrested. Over those 10 years, Wilfried and Angelica had lured countless women into their home. For 10 long years, muffled cries for help and silent sobs in the night echoed from this house, unheard, unanswered, with no one coming to their rescue. But what's astonishing is how German investigators managed to uncover this house of horrors. In the first place, because based on what they found inside, many women had been held captive here. And the most terrifying part, many of them had met a tragic end within these walls. To unravel the mystery of how investigators discovered this house of horrors, let's rewind 5 days before that fateful moment. On that day, Angelica set out with one of their final victims, a woman named Suzanne. Suzanne had been trapped in that earthly hell since February. It all began innocently, like many love stories, when Suzanne stumbled upon a small dating ad in a local newspaper. The man, Wilfried, presented himself as someone seeking love, the owner of a beautiful home in Bosborn. He even included a small photo, a man lounging on a sofa, shoulder-length hair with eyes described as alluring. You might laugh at the image or find it entirely unappealing. Yet, strangely, that seemingly harmless photo became the bait that lured most of Wilfried and Angelica's victims. Perhaps the dating scene in Bosser was so barren that Wilfried became the most attractive man within miles. Throughout February, Susan still told friends about the man she met through that ad. But then one day, she vanished. All attempts to reach her failed. Her phone went unanswered. Messages ignored. Worried friends visited her apartment, knocking repeatedly with no response. Suzanne, a divorced woman with an active social life, had disappeared without a trace, leaving everyone baffled. The grim reality was that Suzanne's nightmare began the moment she set foot in Bosser to visit Wilfried's home, where he claimed to live with his sister, Angelica. Now that we've glimpsed how Susan fell into this earthly hell, we'll gradually uncover the cruel methods of Wilfried and Angelica. By the time Suzanne became a victim, they had mastered their process of capturing and tormenting people. Like the twisted law of serial killers, each successful crime fueled their grotesque confidence. The moment the door of the House of Horrors closed behind Suzanne, a brutal blow extinguished her resistance. When she awoke, she found herself chained in the cold darkness of the basement. Any memory of Wilfried's fainted kindness from their first date dissolved like a dream. From that moment, a horrifying brainwashing process began. Wilfried and Angelica seemed to wield a dark mastery in breaking their victims' spirits. Ensuring escape was unthinkable. Their method was built on extreme suffering. They spared no cruelty: electric pliers, buzzing, scalding water, hair shaved off, and humiliating degradation. Days of starvation to the point of collapse. Even when a woman in that house fully submitted, her will to resist shattered, Wilfried and Angelica didn't relent. Suzanne became a hollow shell, her eyes vacant, reduced to an obedient husk. Wilfried abused her mercilessly, turning her into a mere puppet. The torment was so severe that Suzanne was even seen shopping with Wilfried and Angelica, her head shaved, her body covered in wounds. And no one called for help. By then, Susan was utterly broken, devoid of any desire to escape. This earthly hell persisted until April 21st, when her body finally gave out. Angelica realized another corpse would create too many complications. The woman who posed as a sister to the world, but was actually Wilfried's wife, decided to return Suzanne to her apartment where she had vanished nearly 3 months earlier so she could die there. It would save time compared to their usual method, freezing the body, dismembering it, and burning it in the stove, a process too complex when they had more important things to do. So Angelica brazenly escorted a frail Suzanne out of the house in full view of neighbors. Yet no one suspected a thing. No one called the police despite witnessing the harrowing scene. Suzanne, utterly exhausted, was placed in the passenger seat. Honestly, she was barely alive at that point. Only a miracle could have saved her. She could no longer endure the suffering. Perhaps she even longed for release. But during the drive, an unexpected mishap occurred. Angelica's car broke down. A dire situation, as a mere glance at Susan made it clear she was dying. Explaining her condition as a simple traffic accident would be nearly impossible. In that critical moment, Angelica faced a tough decision. The car was a valuable asset, and with their strained finances, losing it would be a heavy blow. But seeing Suzanne's near-death state, Angelica knew there was no time to hesitate. She took a gamble. Stepping out of the stalled car on the roadside, she approached the nearest house. Staging a clumsy act, she told the homeowner her car broke down while taking a friend to the hospital and urgently requested they call an ambulance. The wail of sirens pierced the rural silence. Emergency responders arrived swiftly, and the doctor with a professional eye immediately recognized that the motionless woman in the passenger seat was no ordinary patient. The wounds on her body weren't from a kitchen mishap. They were marks of brutal abuse, of days of starvation to the point of collapse. The doctor was horrified to note that Susan appeared to have been kept in one position for weeks, perhaps months. The skin around her tailbone, under pressure from sitting, had necrotized, emitting a putrid stench that filled the car. Suzanne was rushed to the nearest hospital in critical condition. Her heart, exhausted from relentless suffering, gave way. She slipped into a deep coma and never awoke. 24 hours later, on April 22, Suzanne took her final breath. Suzanne's death under such unusual circumstances raised alarm among the doctors. They immediately notified the authorities. Just 5 days after that fateful car breakdown, police stormed Wilford and Angelica's house, uncovering a true den of horrors, a place where darkness and crime had reigned for a decade. Over 12,000 video and audio files were recovered, cruelly documenting what had transpired within those cold walls for years. 2. Understand what drove Wilfred and Angelica down this horrific path, we must trace back through time, seeking the first pieces of this dark puzzle. The couple bore the surname Wagner. Wilfred Wagner, born in 1970, was dealt a harsh fate from birth. Marked by an intellectual disability with an IQ of just 59, a score classified as intellectually impaired in modern society. It may sound harsh, but Wilfred's sluggishness was undeniable. Evident in his academic performance to the extent that he was sent to a special education facility to learn the basics: reading, writing, arithmetic, and logical thinking. With such a low IQ, Wilfred struggled immensely to understand social relationships. Making friends felt like an insurmountable challenge. As a result, he sought companionship in other beings' dogs. He enrolled in a dog training course, but his patience had its limits. He didn't attend all the sessions and eventually dropped out, spending much of his time helping his mother and stepfather at the family farm. Later, he landed a menial job as a mechanic in a car garage. Despite his low IQ, Wilfred was a functioning adult capable of manual labor. He could use his hands and follow orders. As long as he was told what to do, things went smoothly. Unfortunately, no employer seemed patient enough to train someone like Wilfred, and time after time, he was fired. Life's hardships forced him to rely on social welfare to survive. In the early 1990s, welfare services secured him a position in the military, but sadly, he wasn't deployed as a true soldier, more like a sacrificial pawn. His brief military stint ended in 1994. Wilfred returned to his hometown, carrying invisible scars in his psyche, and married a woman history seems to have forgotten. Her story, however, resurfaced painfully when the House of Horrors was uncovered nearly 20 years later. This woman, whom we'll call Emma, met Wilfred through small newspaper ads, the very method he'd used to ensnare other victims. At the time, Wilfred still had a youthful charm and an appealing appearance, making it easy to woo young women yearning for love. Emma quickly fell for him, even agreeing to marry him after a brief courtship. This hasty decision met with apprehension from Emma's family, who had an ominous feeling about the rushed marriage. They were right. Emma was about to step into an earthly hell, becoming a bloody lesson that would refine Wilfred's cruel methods of torment in the years to come. The earliest signs of his malice emerged in their married life. A single overcooked meal could ignite Wilfred's rage. He'd unleash a torrent of vicious insults, berating Emma as a useless wife who couldn't fulfill her duties. Then, brutal beatings would follow. Before family dinners or outings, Wilfred would use a hair dryer to heat Emma's bruised arms. A vile act to conceal the marks of abuse. Over months of torment, Emma's spirit crumbled. She began to believe no one could help her, even though her family was ready to save her. Wilfred relentlessly planted toxic lies in her mind, convincing her he was the only one who could care for her, that she wouldn't survive a night outside. Even in the car, Emma found no peace. A minor speeding infraction would result in Wilfred pinching her until she bled. To deepen the humiliation of his wretched wife, Wilfred brazenly invited Michaela, his ex-lover from before his military days, to live with them. His relationship with Michaela hadn't lasted, but now he wanted to use her as a tool to torment Emma. Both Wilfred and Michaela took pleasure in degrading and humiliating Emma, turning her life into an endless cycle of suffering. In the hell Emma endured, depravity and cruelty knew no bounds. They openly engaged in intimacy in front of her, reducing her to an inanimate object, forcing her into degrading acts. Emma was often chained by the neck like an animal, starved until her body was a skeletal shell. Wilfred and Michaela stripped her of all humanity, turning her into an object to fulfill their sick desires whenever they pleased. Emma didn't escape, not just because her spirit was utterly broken, but because of Wilfred's vicious threats. He instilled terror in her mind, warning that if she dared flee or speak out, he'd hunt down and exact revenge on her family, even if it cost him his life or years in prison. But, thankfully, familial love triumphed over cruelty. Emma's parents, increasingly worried by her lack of contact, sought her out at Wilfred's house of hell. They rescued her from her excruciating suffering and filed a complaint. Wilfred and Michaela were charged with violence and abuse. However, the depraved pair offered a shameless defense, claiming They had to destroy Emma's spirit and harm her because she couldn't handle her husband seeing other women. Tragically, this absurd excuse nearly succeeded, as domestic violence wasn't yet taken seriously by society at the time, and husbands were seen as having every right over their wives. Fortunately, a brave neighbor testified at the trial, recounting the horrific sight of Wilfrid, forcing Emma to kneel on all fours and declare, "I am your servant." This testimony crossed the judge's threshold of tolerance. Deeming it an act of degradation, the judge sentenced Wilfrid to 2 years and 9 months in prison, while Michaela received a 1-year suspended sentence. After the trial, the two parted ways. Wilfrid was released, but what he had done to Emma seemed to have etched itself into his psyche. He had enjoyed the ability to abuse, humiliate, and beat her at will. Those brutal acts gave him sensations he'd never experienced before. So after his release, he began searching for a new woman, either to repeat his depraved acts or to assist him in abusing others. That woman was Angelica, whom he met through small newspaper ads in 1999. Angelica Wagner, also born in 1970, shared a commonality with Wilfrid. She, too, grew up on a farm with parents who were farmers. She had a brother, but he plays no role in this dark tale. Unlike Wilfrid, however, Angelica was intelligent, remarkably so. Psychologists later marveled at her unusually high IQ. Angelica excelled in sharp problem solving, rapid learning, and analytical thinking. Her IQ was estimated at around 120. An astonishing figure comparable to the notorious serial killer Ted Bundy. One of the most intelligent psychopaths of the past 50 years, Angelica possessed a similar intellect. So, brace yourself for what's to come. As a child, Angelica was described as kind, but sadly she had few friends. Her peers were unkind, mocking her ugly and unattractive appearance. Angelica struggled with being overweight, and the bob haircut her mother gave her at home only made her feel more out of place, completely ostracized by her classmates. Disinterested in academics, Angelica left school early, and became a gardener. At least plants wouldn't tell her she was ugly or her hairstyle was outdated. During this time, she began harboring negative emotions, a simmering resentment toward those around her, especially the beautiful girls she'd pass on the street. After her father's death, her mother grew more demanding, ordering Angelica to quickly find a husband, leave home, start a family, and meet her aging mother's future needs. Angelica complied. She started responding to small dating ads in the newspaper, and fate led her to Wilfrid, a man fresh out of prison after a messy divorce. At least according to his ad. They met and things progressed alarmingly well. For the first time, Angelica had a romantic relationship. She couldn't wait any longer. She finally had someone. Angelica, a woman who had never tasted true love, was ready to do anything to keep Wilfrid by her side. She gave him all her meager savings, a considerable sum. Wilfrid, ever quick to sniff out money, promptly proposed and she accepted. Just 8 weeks after their fateful meeting, Wilfrid and Angelica were married. The Wagner couple, two deeply scarred individuals with twisted desires, was born, poised to unleash terror across Germany. And so the years of horror began. Indeed, Wilfrid and Angelica became a pair at a dizzying pace. We have Wilfrid, a somewhat dim-witted man, desperate for a woman in his life to vent his anger and satisfy his dark desires. On the other hand, Angelica, an intelligent woman who tragically had never been truly loved, blindly followed her husband's every word. She endured his beatings, convincing herself it was normal in a relationship. Wilfried had his own perverse habits. Whenever Angelica dared to defy him or fail to comply, he'd smother her under thick blankets to muffle her screams. Their dilapidated house amplified every sound. Trapped beneath layers of fabric, Angelica endured relentless blows. With sick pleasure, Wilfried would pour boiling water on his wife, already suffering in her hell beneath the blankets, half suffocating and excruciating pain. Angelica often lost consciousness. Wilfried and Angelica's married life was fraught with hardship from the start. The house they bought was so run down that the couple decided to divorce to separately take on loans for repairs, avoiding excessive joint debt under Germany's common property marriage laws. In reality, the repairs were never done. Yet, Wilfried and Angelica continued living together in that decrepit house. No heating, damp, and riddled with mold. Unable to afford proper renovations, the couple devised a brilliant idea. Respond to small newspaper ads to scam gullible women, siphoning their savings into a shared bank account. But with their clumsy and thoughtless nature, Wilfried and Angelica's scams quickly hit a dead end. Often, Angelica would flip through ad pages for Wilfried to select prey. He didn't just target young German women, but also women from the Czech Republic. This is why today it's suspected that the true number of their victims may be far higher than officially recorded. Women whose existence was already unnoticed may have vanished without a trace upon entering the Wagner siblings' home. To avoid raising suspicion, the cunning pair always posed as siblings living with the young women they targeted. Angelica acted as the driver, chauffeuring Wilfried to dates since he didn't even have a driver's license. In 2008, according to official reports, the Wagner couple claimed their first victim. A woman named Anna Marie fell into Wilfried's romantic trap. She was their first official victim, and their methods were still unrefined. Wilfried demonstrated his ability to manipulate and mentally subdue women through violence. He quickly gained access to Anna's bank account, often showing up at her home and helping himself to food from her fridge without asking. Fortunately for Anna Marie, she wasn't confined in the couple's house at that time. She soon sensed something strange and abnormal about Wilfried and Angelica. After a year in a violently abusive relationship, Anna's brother, at her request, threatened Wilfried with legal action if he dared come near her again. Thus, Anna Marie survived her harrowing encounter with the Wagner couple, who continued to hunt for new prey through small newspaper ads. Thanks to Anna's savings and bank account, Wilfried and Angelica lived comfortably for a year. Soon after letting their first prey slip away, they began searching for a new victim. It didn't take long to find another. Though we know little about her as her identity is protected by law. We only know that Wilfried successfully manipulated her, swindling 15,000. Approximately 16,500 at the time. This abusive relationship ended only when the woman was hospitalized after a severe illness. Wilfried and Angelica quickly cast their net again in the pages of old newspapers. This time, a woman named Crystal took the bait. In a saccharine dating ad, Wilfried painted himself as a kind, affectionate man seeking a lasting relationship. It sounded too good to be true, hardly a hint of the horrors awaiting her. This time, the sinister couple wasted no time. Wilfried feigned love for Crystal, promising her the world and inviting her to move into his beautiful house in Bozaborn, which he claimed he'd renovate with his sister, Angelica. The first 3 weeks passed with an eerie calm. Crystal wondered if she'd made the right choice, but Wilfried seemed incredibly kind and attentive. All three slept in the cramped living rooms due to lack of space, but at least they were together. Crystal slowly adjusted to the couple's odd lifestyle. They slept all day and stayed awake at night. The house was never cleaned. Everything was filthy, and the only source of heat was a single ancient electric stove, the kind you'd find in run-down apartments, guzzling electricity, but barely warming the room. Crystal shivered constantly and began telling Wilfried she wanted to leave. She had contributed to the household expenses, but after 3 weeks in this squalor, nothing had improved. Wilfried and Angelica's promises of renovations remained empty words. That's when her hellish captivity began. To keep Crystal from panicking, Wilfried and Angelica reassured her she was free to leave whenever she wanted, except the door was locked and she no longer had her keys, identification, or money. Crystal realized she had nowhere to go and was completely cut off from the outside world. The trap had snapped shut, and brutal abuse began. To break her spirit and eliminate any thought of escape, the cruel couple forbade her from bathing, ordering her to clean herself like a cat by licking her body. A humiliating act Crystal was forced to obey under Wilfried's command. She was also barred from using the toilet normally. Wilfried simply handed her a filthy sanitary tray. Angelica would maliciously douse Crystal with a bucket of scalding water in the middle of the night, ensuring she couldn't sleep peacefully. For 3 months, Crystal endured this hell. She no longer had the strength or will to attempt to escape. Overwhelmed by shame over her condition and the horrific filth covering her body, Crystal suffered through those hellish months until the day Wilfried and Angelica forced her to sign a document stating her injuries were accidental, absolving the Wagner couple of responsibility. Then they drove her to the nearest train station, handed back her keys and ID, and let her board a train home. The harsh reality was that Crystal was released primarily because she no longer held any appeal for Wilfried. He even found her repulsive. So he simply wanted to be rid of her. Crystal, scarred physically and emotionally, didn't dare file a complaint. She lived in seclusion at home, constantly fearing the might return and ashamed for having trusted a simple newspaper ad. This gentle failure taught the Wagner couple 2 key lessons. First, no woman would willingly stay in that filthy, dilapidated house, so they had to confine and break their victims from the start. Second, if Wilfried wanted to torment and abuse his victims for months, hygiene was crucial. These were the 2 points Wilfried and Angelica aimed to improve when Anika arrived. In mid-2013, a young woman named Anika entered their home. She quickly fell for Wilfried, though she found Angelica somewhat strange. Another whirlwind wedding took place on October 18, 2013. Everything happened at breakneck speed. It's unclear what sweet words Wilfried whispered to these women or what strange charisma he possessed. But he consistently succeeded in marrying them mere weeks after meeting. Anika's family didn't even know about her marriage until her mother tried to contact her. All she received was a voicemail from Anna introducing Wilfried Wagner as her husband. Eventually, Anika called back, reassuring her mother everything was fine, and Angelica even drove Anna to meet her mother. Anika's mother felt somewhat relieved seeing her daughter seemingly okay, unaware that by then Anika was completely under control. That brief meeting would be the last time they saw each other. As mentioned, the sinister couple knew they had to swiftly break their victim's spirits, so Anna was soon locked in a freezing bathtub day and night. Angelica mercilessly turned on scalding water, drenching the young woman chained to the tub with no way to escape this hell. The bathroom windows had long been sealed shut, making nighttime escapes futile. Whenever Anna dared resist, Wilfried would storm in with a terrifying electric cable, dipping it into the icy water and pulling it out only after her desperate pleas. These brutal acts served one purpose: to keep Anika entirely under their control. Though experts later concluded that Angelica and Wilfried genuinely enjoyed inflicting such pain. Horrific footage uncovered by investigators showed Anika weakening daily, barely able to speak. Her eyes nearly unable to open, her body covered in burns from scalding water and electric shocks. A neighbor later testified to seeing Anna in the yard in such a pitiful state that she collapsed. Instead of helping her up, Angelica cruelly kicked her, forcing her back into the house of horrors. And no, if you're wondering, that neighbor didn't alert the authorities. 4 days later on August 4th, Anika's heart stopped. For the first time, Angelica and Wilfried faced a corpse and they panicked. They in utter panic to mask the increasingly foul odor. They hastily stuffed Anika into an old freezer in the house. Days passed in anxiety and fear as the couple hesitated to dispose of her body. Angelica even went shopping as usual. But upon returning, she realized the frozen Anika took up too much space in the cramped freezer. So, a gruesome act followed. Angelica callously shoved Anika deeper inside and nonchalantly stacked frozen pizza boxes on top of her. I'm not making this up. Angelica later confessed to placing frozen pizzas on Anna in the freezer. No one knows how long Anika remained in that icy grave. What's certain is that one dark night, the couple removed her from the freezer and began a ghastly task: dismembering her in the bathroom. Angelica later chillingly recounted feeling hotter than ever in the house. Thanks to the fire burning day and night in the stove to dispose of Anika permanently, her ashes were scattered far and wide. The couple drove around casually dumping the remains into roadside fire pits. Meanwhile, Angelica continued texting Anika's mother, pretending to be her ill-fated daughter, assuring her everything was fine and not to worry. One detail nags at me. Anna died in August 2014, and the couple was arrested in April 2016. Who can believe that in the long stretch from August 2014 to April 2016, no other women set foot in the House of Horrors in Boseborn? 2. Search for traces of other victims. We must return to the couple's arrest and the trial. A trial where justice seemed somewhat complicit. When investigators stormed the Wagner couple's home, Angelica and Wilfried showed no intent to flee. In fact, they seemed barely aware of what was happening. As mentioned earlier, investigators found DNA traces in the bathtub and wood stove. Even more horrifying, they uncovered chilling audio and video Recordings capturing Wilfried or Angelica gleefully inflicting excruciating pain on various women who had entered the house. Disturbingly, the identities of some of those victims remain a mystery to this day. On October 26, 2016, the Wagner couple's trial began. As we know, Angelica quickly confessed to all crimes in exchange for a promise from the German court to avoid a life sentence. Wilfried, with his low IQ, appeared utterly lost. He struggled to grasp what was happening, and experts concluded he didn't fully comprehend the crimes he'd committed or their consequences. Angelica, with her sharp intellect and lawyers' help, crafted a meticulously rehearsed defense. She portrayed herself as an abused, mistreated woman, a pitiful wife who only wanted to make her husband happy by finding other women through small ads. She tried to convince the court she never imagined Wilfried would do such horrific things to them. And had she known, she wouldn't have done it. When things spiraled out of control, she continued out of fear for her own safety. Sure, he occasionally tied up and beat them, but sometimes they deserved it for insulting him with harsh words or resisting. Investigators uncovered a staggering figure: 500 dating ads that the Wagner couple had placed in local and even international newspapers, all to lure unsuspecting women into their trap. 500 ads. Meanwhile, throughout this video, we've only covered 8 official victims and 2 brutal murders. That number is a mere fraction of the cruel web the Wagner couple spun across countless pages. Regarding Anika's murder, I can recount the horrific torture that unfolded behind closed doors in the Wagner couple's house because Angelica herself penned a 45-page document meticulously detailing the suffering the young woman endured. According to Angelica, the purpose was to spare the German court a deeper investigation and save time. She shamelessly claimed Anika's death was a tragic accident, that Anika had tried to escape but slipped and hit her head on furniture. So, in Angelica's words, Anika's death wasn't their fault. The question of Angelica and Wilfried's responsibility in this shocking case was fiercely debated. How could things have escalated to such brutal acts? Psychiatric experts were called to evaluate the defendants' psychological profiles. Angelica was described as an exceptionally intelligent woman, but with mild autism, rendering her completely devoid of compassion for her victims. Like many psychopaths and serial killers, Angelica felt no remorse or empathy for the unfortunate women. Their screams, cries, and desperate pleas failed to thaw her icy heart. When a psychologist asked how mad she was, whether, for instance, she could have run a concentration camp during World War II, Angelica calmly replied, "Yes, and I'd have won a medal for it." Angelica was never portrayed as a victim in this horrific tale. She adhered to all of Wilfried's cruel rules. During those dark years, willingly harming victims or even participating in their dismemberment. Experts traced her ruthlessness to her childhood. Angelica had endured relentless humiliation over her appearance, had no friends, and over time developed a deep-seated hatred for humanity, a rage she fully unleashed through Wilfried's depravity. Without Angelica, there would have been no women shackled, handcuffed, or forced to relieve themselves in the cat litter trays. Wilfried, on the other hand, was merely a fool. Experts concluded he had the IQ of a child, unable to discern right from wrong, and thus incapable of remorse. He likely would have been caught and convicted for domestic violence much sooner without Angelica. Surviving victims, upon seeing the familiar faces of the Wagner couple on national television, bravely came forward to testify at the trial, recounting the horrific months they endured. This was also how Anika's mother, who had lost contact with her daughter for so long, learned the painful truth. She recognized Wilfried, the man her daughter had married on the news. After 2 long years of complex legal proceedings, the Wagner couple's trial concluded on October 26, 2018. Angelica, then 49, was sentenced to 13 years in prison. Wilfried, 48, received 11 years in a psychiatric facility. The prosecutor had adamantly pushed for life sentences for both. But the German court considered their psychological conditions to reduce the penalties, granting them a second chance in society. Despite their heinous crimes, abuse, extortion, and murder. Upon hearing the verdict, Angelica flashed a smile of smug satisfaction, having escaped a life sentence. Wilfried, meanwhile, mumbled a rehearsed, emotionless statement. "I want to apologize to all my victims." A hollow apology from a man incapable of grasping others' suffering. Much of the German public expressed outrage at the lenient sentences. Many expected Wilfried and Angelica to face the maximum penalty, life imprisonment, since upon release they'd still be relatively healthy and a potential danger to society. Will there be a second chapter to this horrific story? We'll only know in a few years, as Wilfried is set to be released in 2028 at age 59 and Angelica in 2031 at age 62. Despite experts confirming her as a woman with antisocial and violent tendencies. The story of the House of Horrors in Bosser hasn't fully concluded. After the controversial trial, the tragic house was purchased by a man named Dave Mloud for a shockingly low price, €5,000, approximately €5,500. At the time, Dave publicly declared he'd renovate the house to donate it to a housing association for single women. Authorities, perhaps still haunted by the case's gruesomeness, closely monitored this charitable project. Ironically, Dave Mloud was later arrested for growing cannabis inside that very house of horrors. And so, today's case comes to a close. The true number of the Wagner couple's victims may forever remain an unsolved mystery. Justice, after much debated sentences, seems to have closed the case file. No large-scale search was conducted to trace women from neighboring countries who may have entered the Wagner house. Women whose disappearances likely went unnoticed. Story 5. At a quiet corner of a farm, the naked body of a woman lay motionless on the grass. Her entire body was stained red, covered in horrific wounds. But what sent chills down the spine more than anything was her wide-open eyes, still reflecting the raw fear and despair of her final moments. When police arrived at the scene, even the most seasoned forensic experts couldn't bear the sight, turning away from a scene too gruesome to face directly. The case was later described by a judge as one of the most brutal and savage murders in Australia's history. As news spread, outrage swept through the community. Furious citizens gathered outside the courthouse, loudly demanding the reinstatement of the death penalty to ensure the cruel killers face justice. So, what exactly happened to this young woman? Let's travel back to 1986 to uncover a tragedy that once shook the entire nation of Australia. Blacktown, a suburb in eastern New South Wales, Australia, was known for its pleasant climate, distinct four seasons, and stunning natural beauty. An ideal spot for family vacations. As a multicultural hub, its residents hailed from over 60 countries, speaking more than 60 languages, creating a vibrant tapestry of identities and traditions. However, from the 1980s to the early 1990s, Blacktown was a hotbed of criminal activity. Gangs ran rampant. Drug trafficking and violence were commonplace, making it a focal point for strict police surveillance. It was in this very place that a tragic story unfolded. Anita Lorraine Cabby was a 26-year-old nurse with a cheerful, optimistic personality, a striking appearance, and a captivating figure. She had once won a local beauty pageant and was working at a hospital in Sydney. On February 3, 1986, Anita, known for her punctuality, unexpectedly didn't show up for work. She also didn't answer calls from friends. Her close friend and colleague, Lynn, immediately sensed something was wrong and contacted Anita's parents. To her shock, they revealed that Anita hadn't come home the previous night. Lynn vividly recalled that after work the day before around 3:30 p.m. she, Anita, and a few friends had gone to a nearby restaurant to hang out. They chatted lively, sharing 2 bottles of wine. The gathering wrapped up around 8:30 p.m. Since Anita lived in Blacktown, quite far from the city centre, Lynn drove her to Sydney Central Station to catch the 9:12 p.m. train. The plan was for Anita to call her father from a payphone after arriving in Blacktown so he could pick her up. But when Lynn contacted the family, she learned Anita hadn't called the night before and never made it home. Anita's father, Lynch, felt a wave of unease. He had assumed his daughter stayed at a friend's house since it was late, but this suggested she had vanished mysteriously. He quickly called a few of Anita's friends, and they split up to search Blacktown in central Sydney, but found no trace of her. By 6:30 p.m. that evening, he had no choice but to report her missing to the police. The investigation team sprang into action. Yet, Anita seemed to have vanished without a trace, drawing on past cases of missing women. They suspected this might involve someone known to the victim. Thus, police began thoroughly examining Anita's social relationships and personal circumstances, hoping to uncover a valuable lead. Anita was born on November 2, 1959 in Blacktown. Her father, Lynch, was a graphic designer for the military, while her mother was a dedicated, skilled nurse. Growing up with her younger sister in a loving family, Anita and her sibling excelled in school, loved sports, and were especially fond of surfing on Australia's beautiful beaches. From a young age, Anita was the center of attention, often praised for looking like a doll with her cute face and sharp features. As she grew, she stood out with her tall, graceful frame. In 1979, Anita won a regional beauty pageant. With her looks and charisma, she could have easily entered the entertainment industry. But Anita had different aspirations. She didn't want to rely on her beauty for a living. She yearned to do something more meaningful with her life. So, she followed in her mother's footsteps, becoming a nurse at a Sydney hospital. It was there she met John Cabby, her boyfriend, and later her husband. John, born in 1956, was 3 years older than Anita. He was a handsome man with flowing blonde hair, deep blue eyes, and a radiant smile. His open, cheerful personality made him the life of any gathering among friends. He had worked various jobs from laundry and dishwashing to security to fund his passions for travel and surfing. His life had been carefree, unbound by responsibilities. After years of wandering, John likely felt ready for stability. He enrolled in a nursing training program at the Sydney hospital where fate brought him to Anita. The moment he saw the stunning young woman, he was struck by love at first sight. But Anita's radiant beauty made him feel insecure. So he only admired her from afar, too shy to approach. Sometimes though, fate favors the sincere. Anita noticed John, the ever-smiling, energetic young man. She was drawn to his humor and positive outlook, taking the first steps to connect with him. Their first date was at a restaurant near the hospital. Over a single meal, they both felt a spark. They began meeting frequently, sharing meals and conversations. Their relationship blossomed quickly and they became an official couple. After over a year of dating, John gathered the courage to propose. Anita without hesitation said yes, overwhelmed with joy. On March 27, 1982, they tied the knot. The talented, beautiful couple earned endless praise from friends and family who saw them as a match made in heaven. Anita and John's marriage was filled with happiness and sweetness. Though Anita later suffered a miscarriage, they didn't let the loss consume them. They nurtured hope for the future, adopting 2 adorable dogs, enjoying dinners out, attending concerts, and even buying a small boat for future adventures. In 1984, through a family connection, John started working as a horse trainer. A year later, luck smiled on him when he won a horse race, securing a prize of $10,000 Australian dollars, approximately $7,000 at the time, a significant sum back then. This windfall allowed the couple to embark on their dream trip, traveling to multiple countries and savoring a carefree, blissful time. By 1985, however, after exhausting their savings, they returned to Sydney and life settled back into a routine. Tensions began to surface in their marriage. John wanted stability, planning to buy a house, have children, and build a lasting home. Anita, on the other hand, felt she was still young with a budding career and so much left to explore, earning another degree, learning Spanish, or continuing to travel. Their differing views widened the gap between them, leading to more frequent arguments. Finally, in early 1986, they decided to separate. Anita moved back to her parents' home in Blacktown, while John returned to live with his family. Despite the separation, after some time to cool off, both Anita and John felt they should meet to talk things through. On February 1, 1986, they reunited after being apart. The anger had subsided, replaced by empathy and understanding. They agreed to work together to change, to discuss, and compromise on major decisions to rebuild their relationship. That evening, Anita had dinner at Jay's place where they talked about buying a house and promised to attend John's sister's birthday party. A few days later, everything seemed to be getting back on track until Anita mysteriously vanished. What raised suspicion was Jay's initial reaction upon learning of his wife's disappearance. Instead of immediately searching for her or alerting the police, he went to buy a bottle of whiskey, intending to share a drink with his father-in-law at Anita's Parents' house. Lynch, Anita's father, already held a grudge against John after their separation. Now, with his daughter missing and John showing up with alcohol, as if nothing serious had happened, Lynch's fury boiled over. He berated John harshly, yet John didn't react. He simply returned home and went to sleep. At this point, most would likely think he must be the killer, and the police thought so, too. They quickly placed John at the top of their suspect list and planned a thorough interrogation. But before they could dig deeper, an unexpected emergency call shifted the entire direction of the investigation. In a grassy field south of Blacktown, near the fenced area of Prospect, a dairy farmer stumbled upon something unusual. His cows had gathered in a corner, circling something and refusing to leave. Curiosity drew him closer, and what he saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. The naked body of a woman lying on the grass. She lay face down, her body stained red, her skin torn and ravaged with barely an inch left intact. The farmer, overwhelmed with panic, immediately called the police. The investigative team arrived swiftly. After a preliminary forensic examination, they found the victim had numerous overlapping wounds and signs of assault. Most haunting were her eyes, still wide open, as if her final moments of despair and agony were etched into her gaze. The coroner determined she had been slashed across the throat until she died, a process lasting about 2 minutes, likely the most excruciating and hopeless moments of her life. At the time, the only woman reported missing in the area was Anita. The police removed a gold ring from the victim's finger and showed it to her family for identification. When John saw the ring, he collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably. It was the wedding ring he had personally chosen for Anita. Her father then came to identify the body. As the white sheet was pulled back, revealing his daughter's brutally ravaged remains, the shock was too much. He fainted on the spot. Upon regaining consciousness, he choked through tears. "It's Anita, my daughter." At just 26 years old, this young woman had endured a cruel, indescribably painful end. Her life was forever halted on that fateful night. The police were shaken by the savagery of the crime. Many silently vowed to hunt down the perpetrator and ensure justice was served. The first step in the investigation was to question the initial suspect, John. In the interrogation room, John sat in a daze, his eyes vacant. The police took a hard-line approach. "Admit it, you killed Anita." At first, John denied it. But under mounting pressure, he broke down, crying and shouting, "I did it. Arrest me." However, such an easy confession raised doubts among the police. John's mental state was visibly unstable, and his statement seemed unreliable. They interviewed his friends, who all confirmed John had always deeply loved Anita even during their separation and continued to care for her. No one believed he could have harmed his wife so brutally. Ultimately, the forensic report completely overturned the initial theory. The wounds on Anita's body indicated this wasn't the act of a lone killer. It was a crime committed by multiple perpetrators. Her time of death was pinpointed to the night of February 2nd into the early hours of February 3rd. During that window, John had a solid alibi. He was at his mother's house and never left. The police had misjudged him. John was entirely innocent. They returned to the farm where the body was found and asked the farmer if he had heard anything unusual on the night of February 2nd. He recalled hearing a woman's screams coming from the nearby fenced area that night. Assuming it was a couple arguing, he hadn't paid much attention. The police believed this fenced area was likely the primary crime scene. Yet, after a thorough search, they found no significant clues. With no other leads, they shifted their focus to where Anita was likely last seen. Blacktown train station. A female officer was assigned to wear clothes similar to what Anita had on that night, and board the 9 to 12 p.m. train from Sydney to Blacktown. Throughout the journey, she showed passengers Anita's photo, hoping someone might recognize her or provide a lead. Unfortunately, no one recalled seeing her. Additionally, the police discovered that all public phones at Blacktown Station were out of order that night, explaining why Anita couldn't call her father as planned. Based on the clues they had, the police made a bold hypothesis. Around 9:40 p.m. on February 2nd, Anita arrived at Blacktown Station. Unable to contact her family or find a taxi, she decided to walk home. It's likely that on her way, she encountered danger. The police began searching every nook and cranny along the route Anita might have taken, but with no surveillance cameras at the time. They resorted to reviewing individuals with prior convictions for harassment or violence. Still, they found no breakthrough. As the case hit a dead end in the early hours of February 5th, an officer reviewing reports stumbled upon a crucial detail. On the night Anita disappeared, along the route she likely took, a young boy had reported to police that he and his sister had witnessed an abduction. That evening, the siblings heard screams from the street. Peering through their window, they saw a woman being forcibly dragged into a car, an old white sedan, dusty with a gray primer coat. The boy ran outside to call for help, but the car sped off. They immediately reported it to the police. Shortly after, their neighbor Paul returned home. Hearing the story, he and his girlfriend drove off to search for the suspicious vehicle. They spotted the car near the fenced area, but it was empty and the area seemed normal, so they returned home. Another witness, a 16-year-old boy, also reported that around 9:45 p.m. that night, he heard a series of screams lasting 30 seconds to a minute. Rushing outside, he saw a white sedan driving by with its lights off. Through the rear window, he glimpsed two men restraining a woman struggling violently. The police immediately searched the area that night, but found nothing significant. However, these clues left them nearly certain the abducted woman was Anita. A citywide manhunt for the white sedan was launched. But just as everyone was scrambling to search, another serious complication arose. On the morning of February 7, 1986, at 9 a.m., renowned television host John Law shocked the nation by broadcasting the full forensic report of Anita's autopsy live on his morning show. He read every gruesome detail aloud, leaving nothing out. The broadcast sent shockwaves across the country. Police switchboards were overwhelmed with calls from outraged citizens, furious over the leak of confidential information, and horrified by the brutality of the crime. The officers investigating the case were the most frustrated. Now that the entire nation knew the case details, it was like stirring the hornet's nest, making their job even harder. They immediately launched an internal investigation, but couldn't pinpoint how the report had been leaked. Yet, this wave of public outrage brought an unexpected benefit. Citizens across Australia began eagerly providing leads, with many even donating money to support the investigation. The New South Wales government also offered a reward of $50,000 Australian dollars, approximately $35,000 at the time, hoping to encourage people to come forward with information to catch the culprits. On February 10, 1986, Anita's family held her funeral. Countless locals attended voluntarily, bidding farewell to the ill-fated young woman as she was laid to rest. The most devastated person at the ceremony was John, her husband, who had falsely confessed under pressure. Midway through the service, he broke down, wailing uncontrollably. His cries were filled with despair and helplessness. The funeral wasn't just a farewell to a young woman. It was a wake-up call for Australian society. The public's anger and concern placed immense pressure on the police. Fortunately, just one day after the funeral, the case took a significant turn. While reviewing records, police discovered that on February 2, the day Anita was abducted, a report had been filed about a stolen car. A white sedan had been taken, matching the description of the suspicious vehicle linked to the case. Following this lead, police quickly identified 3 suspects connected to the car theft: John Raymond Travers, Michael Murdoch, and Leigh Murphy. All 3 were familiar faces at the police station, especially Raymond, a name officers knew all too well. Raymond's upbringing was a textbook recipe for a criminal. His father was an alcoholic, gambler, abuser, and addict. His mother, perpetually ill and frail, couldn't manage her children. Raymond began using drugs at 12 and was an alcoholic by 14. His life revolved around theft and robbery. His greatest thrill came from torturing and abusing animals. He was even caught engaging in bestiality with sheep, pigs, chickens, and other animals. Additionally, Raymond was a depraved criminal with a habit of using a knife to threaten women and vulnerable men in public restrooms or train stations. Though only 18, he had already been linked to at least 12 harassment cases. As for the other 2 suspects, Michael Murdoch, also 18, was Raymond's loyal accomplice. He did little beyond drinking, brawling, and stealing. Les Murphy, 22, was hot-tempered, prone to starting trouble, and had multiple arrests for theft. All 3 had criminal records. Now tied to the white car, potential evidence directly linked to the abduction, they became prime suspects. The police swiftly arrested them and separated them for interrogation. During questioning, the police deliberately avoided mentioning Anita, focusing solely on the car theft. Michael and Leigh remained eerily calm, answering clearly without slipping up. But Raymond couldn't hide his anxiety, whether from fear or sheer stupidity. Right from the start, he blurted out a self-incriminating statement. "I didn't slit her throat." The police hadn't even mentioned Anita. Yet, he implicated himself. That statement was as good as an accidental confession. Raymond was detained while the other 2 were temporarily released, but kept under close surveillance. On February 22, 1986, Raymond, desperate for cigarettes while in custody, asked the police to contact his girlfriend, Catherine, to bring him some. The police agreed and seized the opportunity to approach Catherine, persuading her to cooperate in extracting information from Raymond. Without hesitation, Catherine agreed. Equipped with a hidden listening device, she met Raymond. He was completely off guard, even brazenly boasting about his crimes without restraint. While chatting with his girlfriend, Raymond laughed as he recounted the details of Anita's murder. As if it were a grand achievement, he revealed that besides himself, Michael and Leigh, two others, were involved. Les brothers, Michael Murphy and Gary Murphy. After detailing the entire crime, Raymond tried to convince Catherine to help him destroy the murder weapon, blood-stained clothes, and the white car used in the abduction. He didn't stop there. Raymond concocted a wild escape plan. He wanted Catherine to sabotage train tracks so a train would crash into the prison, creating chaos for him to flee. If that failed, he planned to have Leigh and Michael bring guns to rescue him. Whether out of arrogance or a disturbed mind, Raymond genuinely believed this was a perfect plan. The police then had Catherine, still carrying a recording device, visit Michael. From him, they extracted further details of the group's crimes. With the recordings in hand, the police located the murder weapon, bloodied clothes, and the white car. Next, they expanded their investigation to the remaining two suspects. Michael Murphy, 33, was the eldest of 9 siblings. He had been sentenced to 25 years for multiple thefts, later escaping prison and living on the run for years. Gary Murphy, 28, was hearing impaired. To friends, he seemed a hard-working, gentle laborer. But in reality, he had several arrests for car theft. With witnesses, evidence, and confessions secured, the police swiftly arrested the remaining 4 suspects. The case that had enraged all of Australia was finally solved. From the day of Anita's murder to the arrest of all perpetrators, Australian police took just 22 days, a remarkably efficient investigation for the time. During the interrogation process, police compiled statements from all 5 criminals and reconstructed events of the crime on the night of February 2, 1986. That evening, the 5 men, heavily intoxicated, were driving aimlessly when they spotted Anita, a beautiful young woman walking alone. Driven by lust, they immediately abducted her, forced her into the car, and sped off. In the cramped confines of the vehicle, the 5 took turns assaulting and violating Anita. She begged for mercy, but her pleas were met with even more savage violence. Raymond even pressed a knife to her throat, threatening her life if she didn't stay silent. Along the way, they used Anita's money to buy gas, then drove south to a remote field surrounded by barbed wire. There, they dragged a near unconscious Anita out of the car, pulled her through the fence, and continued their assault in the field. At that moment, another car approached, Paul and his girlfriend holding flashlights, searching the area. The group immediately dropped to the ground, covering Anita's mouth. They were mere feet away from her. A few more steps and they might have spotted her. But the darkness concealed everything. Paul and his girlfriend missed the only chance to save her. Some speculate that even if Paul had found Anita, the outcome might not have changed. He and his girlfriend could have become victims, too. The torture by these 5 monsters lasted at least an hour. When Raymond sobered up, fear of exposure set in. He told the group, "She's seen our faces, heard our names. She can't be allowed to live." Though no one objected, none wanted to be the first to act. Ultimately, it was Raymond who took the knife and attacked Anita. After the murder, the group fled, burning the clothes they were wearing. However, Raymond, thinking himself clever, kept a pair of jeans as a souvenir, unwittingly providing key evidence that would later help convict him. On March 16, 1987, the trial, dubbed by the media as the trial of the century, began. The 5 criminals were brought before justice amid the sting rage of the Australian public. Throughout the proceedings, large crowds gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs, chanting slogans, and even creating effigies of the men hanging in protest, demanding the reinstatement of the death penalty to deal with these beasts in human form. The 5 defendants faced over 50 charges, including kidnapping, theft, robbery, prison escape, assault, and murder. Yet, none accepted their punishment willingly, each employing every trick to evade guilt. 4 of them pinned the entire murder on Raymond, hoping to absolve themselves. Michael's lawyer argued that excessive media coverage had biased the jury, requesting a postponement. Gary's lawyer claimed his client was intellectually disabled, unable to distinguish right from wrong, and shouldn't be sentenced like a typical offender. But faced with undeniable evidence, all their tactics proved futile. On June 10, 1987, after 54 grueling days of trial, all 5 were convicted of assault and murder. On June 16, the Supreme Court of New South Wales delivered its verdict. All 5 defendants were sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Since the death penalty had been abolished in Australia by then, this was the harshest possible punishment. As the trial concluded, the case left a profound impact on the Australian public. Judge Allen, visibly emotional, stated during sentencing, "This is one of the most violent and cruel cases I've seen in my career as a judge." The prosecutor added, "Anita's death is one of the most savage and inhumane murders in the state's history." Though the 5 perpetrators were brought to justice, the nightmare continued for Anita's family. Her husband, John, was consumed by grief after her death, spiraling into alcohol and drug addiction, which shattered his life. Over time, John gradually overcame his crisis. He often visited the church, sitting quietly by Anita's grave, whispering words of love and longing. Years later, he found the courage to remarry and have children, starting anew. But he changed his name, trying to bury the past. It wasn't until his son grew up that John realized a name change couldn't erase the pain. Encouraged by his son, he reclaimed his original name and chose to face his past head-on. Anita's parents never fully recovered from their loss, but they channeled their grief into action, joining forces with the family of another victim, Ebony Simpson, to establish an organization providing psychological support for families of murder victims. This group later partnered with the government, raising 9.4 million Australian dollars, approximately $6.66 million US at the time, to create Grace's Place, a center supporting children, teens, and families who lost loved ones to murder. It became a beacon of light in the darkness, offering warmth and emotional support. As for the 5 criminals who escaped the death penalty, their fates unfolded grimly. Raymond was transferred between multiple prisons after sentencing. In 1996, he attempted to escape by sawing through the back of a prison van with another inmate, but failed, leading to stricter monitoring. Michael Murphy was diagnosed with liver cancer while serving his sentence and died in February 2019. Gary Murphy, confined for life, was frequently beaten and assaulted in prison due to Anita's case. On June 25, 2019, he was ambushed by a group of inmates in the prison bathroom, suffering severe head injuries that nearly killed him. The remaining two, Les Murphy and Michael Murdoch, lived in constant fear and ostracism in prison, never knowing a day of peace. Perhaps this was the fitting retribution for the horrific crimes they committed. The Anita Cabby case not only shocked Australia with its brutality, but also left a lasting mark on popular culture. It has been featured in numerous true crime documentaries and media under the title The Crime That Shocked the Nation. To honor Anita, authorities named a park in Blacktown after her, a place where people can remember the ill-fated young woman amid the serene greenery of nature. As the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper, thank you for joining me here at Mr. Nightcared. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.